to agree on the predicate crimes. They have to agree which instances of the predicate crimes they're saying that were proven. It has to be unanimous. Then they have to agree that there was an enterprise and that there was agreement. So there's a number of steps that they had to go through. So I'm not surprised that this is the charge that they had the most issue with.
And what about this overlying, a lot was made of the body language in court yesterday regarding the attorneys and Sean P. Diddy Combs sitting there and slumping down, and someone, one of the attorneys was rubbing her temples. What do you make of that? Because I think that stuck with a lot of people. There would be a reason why he would react like that.
It's the gravity of the moment, right? Because everything up until then, the lawyers, him, you're preparing, you're thinking, you're analyzing, you're strategizing. But now there's nothing to do. There's no arguments. There's no one to listen to. It's just waiting. So it's the weight of the moment. And let's remember, they did have that issue with Juror 25, who said they was not following the rules. So now the attorneys are replaying. Should we have had him removed? Should we have had the judge do an inquiry? You know, you start as an attorney playing back all these moments in your mind, and you're thinking about that. Did we make the right decision? And so that's the gravity of what we're talking about. And as a defense attorney, anytime I sit next to my client and they're facing that kind of time, we're talking about life sentences. Yeah. You feel the weight of it for your client. This has been your client for a year, and you're aware of what is at stake.
Shauna, when we're in this situation right now, and we know we've got people in the courtroom, right? And we've got people outside the courtroom, and we've got people who have talked to the attorneys, and we've got people who are watching it. And we know that there's been a decision made. Tell me what's going on in between those rooms. There's a room where the jury is right now, and they're not in the courtroom.
No.
Yeah,
so
we
there's
should say really quickly, the jury and judge have not gotten into the courtroom, but Combs and his defense attorneys are in the courtroom. So they are sitting there waiting.
So what is happening in the jury room, and how long can it be before we might know?
As soon as all the parties can get there. They do allow for the parties. Remember, the prosecution is not in the room yet, so they are going to be there once typically they'll allow some time for family to get there, to be there for this verdict to be read. So everyone's scurrying into place, right? It's like, hurry up and get there, hurry up and get there. The jury's not far. Their room is not far. It's off of the chambers, so it's not far at all. The marshal just has to bring them in. They are actually the ones that are most ready for this verdict. That's the funny part.
Got it. Well, don't go anywhere. Stay right here.
Because we're going to talk about this right now.
We're going to go to Phil Tate right now.
Yes.
He's in Lower Manhattan in front of the courtroom. Phil, what's happening right now inside of the courthouse behind you?
Yeah, well, Pedro, moments ago, we have now learned that Sean Combs is now seated next to his defense attorneys inside of the courtroom, but there is still no judge and there is no jury. Now, we have also learned that while he was inside of the courtroom, he briefly smiled towards his family, made praying hands. It's something that's been mentioned many times through these several weeks of the trial, and then he walked to his seat. Now, we're told he is wearing a light-colored sweater over a collared shirt. The back of his shirt is slightly untucked. Again, the judge has not taken to the bench as of yet. Pedro, Michelle, one thing I can tell you is that as we went out here about 10 minutes before our 10 o'clock show, the family was seen exiting the courthouse. Many of his family members, there were 2 black sprinters. As we've seen them arrive each and every day, they exited the courthouse. Again, we have just learned that Sean Combs is now seated in the courtroom. The judge has not taken the bench as of yet, and the jury pool has not been brought inside of the courtroom. Guys?
All right, thank you. Someone who has been following this from the very beginning, anchor Mike Marza from the newsroom right now. Mike.
Well, just to piggyback off of what Phil just said, Michelle, we understand that the judge has taken his seat at the bench, and we expect the jury to be brought in just a moment. But let's take you back through the past 28 days of testimony. This trial, 8 weeks, and these jurors have been listening to sexually graphic material. In fact, even watching some of these videos, and we now understand that there has been a verdict reached on all 5 counts. The sticking point yesterday was count 1, the most complicated and complex count, this conspiracy of racketeering, a racketeering conspiracy. And so the judge is about to hear the verdict, as he just told everybody inside the court to maintain order. And Shauna can tell you this is a dramatic moment that is happening inside the court, as Darla Miles is witnessing it live, and we'll hear from her in the following hours. But this is the moment where the jury foreperson will read the counts. It will go count 1, that racketeering conspiracy, count 2, count 3, count 4, and count 5. Now, counts 2 through 5, the jury of 8 men and 5 women reached a decision last night, and those deal with the sex trafficking and the transportation to engage in prostitution of Sean Combs's 2 ex-girlfriends, Cassie Ventura and a woman who testified under the pseudonym Jane. It was a lengthy process to go through the graphic detail of these sexual escapades, which were titled either freak-offs or hotel nights or king nights. And the jury, again, sitting there listening to all this material, and now have made a decision based upon all of their deliberations of about 14 hours over the course of a little more than 2 days, as we add the half an hour or so this morning that they returned this morning to talk about count one. Count one is a very complicated process because the jury had to find that Sean Combs committed 2 underlying crimes as part of what the prosecution dubbed a criminal enterprise, eliciting bodyguards and former personal assistants to carry out his sexual gratification. And in that process, trafficking escorts from state to state, and then the force, fraud, or coercion of these alleged victims, Jane and Cassie Ventura. So we are now just moments away hearing what the verdict will be for Sean Diddy Combs. I can tell you that this is quite the fall from grace. If you think about the man who was born in Harlem, soared to the top of the hip-hop game in the 1990s, grew up in Mount Vernon, was the CEO and the head of Bad Boy Entertainment, but then spun that off to build huge brands like Ciroc Vodka, Sean John Clothes. And now he's a 55-year-old man sitting in a courtroom at 500 Pearl Street inside a Lower Manhattan courthouse, waiting to see if he will die in prison for his alleged crimes. All right, we'll send it back to you as we wait for this verdict to be read. But Shauna, no doubt this is the most dramatic part of this trial, right?
Absolutely. And what we have to remember is that we may not get the verdict right away because the jury is going to read it. The judge is going to hold the courtroom.
The verdict is being read right now. We're being told from Darla Miles, who's in the courtroom.
Excellent.
So we are waiting to hear exactly each one of the counts, and once we get that verdict, we'll bring it to you here. But as a defense attorney, what is this moment like in that courtroom as you're sitting with a defendant and they're learning what is going to happen in their life? Their life will change forever.
This is that moment. You're at the top of the roller coaster. It's anxious. You're on pins and needles. You have no idea what's going to happen.
Not guilty for count one.
Count one.
Guilty for
the
count
racketeering.
one. The one they were stuck on.
Again, that is count one, racketeering conspiracy, which had a maximum sentence of life in prison.
But that's just the first of 5 counts. We still have 4 more.
What do you make of that?
I'm not surprised. I think that this was a tall order, and I didn't expect this. The people that you're asking about being involved in this enterprise are people that are charged with doing a job that says that they will do what you ask them to do. Delivering supplies is not being complicit in a crime. Being a security guard who's present when he is assaulting his girlfriend is not saying that he knows she's being trafficked. I think by virtue of their job descriptions, this could not have been agreement into a part of this conspiracy.
Because these were bodyguards, assistants, etc. These were not co-partners in a business enterprise, which would suggest organized crime.
Exactly.
Okay.
We are still waiting to hear what the other counts, how they will determine the other counts here. We just learned count 2
is not guilty.
Not guilty. That is.
That's sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and that's for victim 1, which is Cassie Ventura. The max sentence of that would be life in prison. Tell me what you think about that.
But we do really quickly have to say, count 3 is guilty.
Count 3
is guilty.
Count 3 is guilty. That's transportation to engage in prostitution with victim 1, which is relating to his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. That carries a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison.
Correct.
So far, count 1, count 2, not guilty, but count 3, which he faces 2 similar charges with his second victim, which will be Jane Doe. What does that make out for you? How do you
What that says is that they saw the transportation for prostitution. They believe that he was aware of what he was doing and that he was engaging and moving individuals for the purposes of prostitution. As far as trafficking, what they're saying is that they do not believe that him getting Cassie to these freak-offs was done under force, duress, or coercion. And that is what the jury is telling us.
Count 4, not guilty regarding sex trafficking by force or coercion. Not guilty.
And that's in relation to Jane Doe. But count 5
just came in.
Guilty. Just came in.
Guilty, right.
and that's relating again to Jane.
That is a consistent verdict with the law, that's consistent with the burden that was met by the prosecution, and it's consistent across the board. What they found is that there was no force, there was no undue pressure, there was no coercion. That is why the trafficking charges fell. What they did find in both cases is that he was very well aware, regardless of a freak-off, a hotel night, or a king night, that he was moving individuals for the purposes of prostitution.
What is your reaction to all of this?
Not surprised. We were talking about this last night, and I actually said this to some colleagues. I said, there's no way he agreed that they found him guilty of trafficking and transportation, because if they had two of those, they would have already had the predicate crimes for RICO. There wouldn't have been a discussion about the drugs. So it meant that they only found guilty on one or the other.
So if I'm just joining right now, if I'm just joining and I'm sitting down because someone said, hey, the verdict is coming out, can you kind of put in concise terms for me what we have? We have him guilty on 2 counts, right?
Correct. We have him guilty of transportation for prostitution with regards to Jane and with regards to Cassie. He is not guilty on the trafficking for Jane or Cassie, and he is not guilty on the RICO charge. And that's consistent with the evidence. I think the strongest evidence they had, as far as the prosecution went, was showing that he paid for individuals to be moved and transported for prostitution.
Okay.
Right now, you're taking a live look outside of the courtroom, where now you see the frenzy begins. You see supporters, you see someone up there jumping with their hand in the air, you see media there. We want to bring in Mike Marza, who's sitting at the
wait
flash.
just first? Sean,
really
I've got
quickly.
you, and I really just kind of want to understand this. Is this a win in the courtroom?
Yes.
Is this more of a win for the prosecution or more of a win for the defense? Just
This
so I
is
understand.
more of a win for the defense, because what you have taken off the table are the life sentences. That is when you are looking at these kind of charges, you want all of the charges that have life sentences off the table, and that is what they've achieved here. So this is a win. For the prosecution, this is not good. They did not prove their case, and this unanimous jury says that you did not prove those claims within court.
And again, to counts 3 and 5, the maximum sentence there is 10 years in prison.
Correct.
Far different from the minimum of 15 for you would have faced for count 2 and 4, and again, max life in prison. Mike Marza is standing by. He has a question for you.
Absolutely.
Mike.
Yeah, Shauna, Michelle, Pedro, and Sam, as we watch these live pictures outside of 500 Pearl Street, I'm reminded that the spectacle that this trial became over the 8 weeks. You had Kanye West showing up. You had Kid Cudi, a rapper himself, also testifying as part of an arson accusation. Some of those underlying crimes that were not proven according to the jury in count 1. But as we watch the cameras, and we're talking about dozens of cameras, as you would imagine, entertainment programs from around the world, and then, of course, Eyewitness News and the like, they're down at 500 Pearl Street. But Shauna, as we talk about the counts and we think about what this case was, there was so much testimony from Jane and from Cassie that the defense pointed to where they were favorable to what was happening, where they actually seemed to like what they were what was happening with these sexual encounters, and even in some cases set them up themselves. How much of that testimony do you think played a role in the decision by the jury?
Mike, I think a lot of that played into this decision, because what you have to remember is that the jury is charged with making these decisions at the time in which you made these decisions. So the jury has to go back. And there are many times, I think, and that is what the defense pointed out, was that they made a decision to be complicit at the time, and in retrospect, they look back and realize something different. That's not the way the law works. The law works is, what was your intent at the time that these acts were committed?
Okay.
What was in your mind? And there was enough of it wasn't clear. These were long-term relationships that they were in. There was a lot of domestic, personal, sexual lifestyle choices that they were basing these charges on. And I think that what the jury is saying is that we are not going to find that promising to go on trips, in the case of Jane, promising these events, dinners, that's enough for RICO. And I think that is above, that does not meet the standard of law that we typically look at when we're looking at a RICO organization.
Again, this was not a domestic violence case.
Correct,
And
exactly.
Now that the jury, we just learned, has been excused from the courtroom there, let's get to Kimberly Richardson, who's live for us outside of the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Kimberly, walk us through that moment as we all learned and the media all learned there about Sean Combs being found not guilty on 3 of 5 counts.
Well, Pedro, the mood here this morning, ever since about 7 or 8 a.m., has been particularly tense given how the day ended yesterday. Everybody knew the jurors were coming back this morning. We didn't know the verdict, but we knew they had reached a verdict on counts 2 through 5 and unknown on count 1. So everybody out here in front of the courthouse was waiting. They didn't know, they didn't anticipate whether it was going to be a long day, maybe midday, but definitely not within just over an hour. When that verdict was read out here, there really has been very little reaction. Sean Combs' family, they came here this morning. They were inside the courtroom. We're told just before the verdict was read, he smiled and he put his hands together in a prayer symbol and smiled at his family. We need to go back. One of the things we talked about, Cassie Ventura and the woman that testified as Jane. The prosecution put up 34 witnesses in their case. The defense put up none. Some folks raised eyebrows with that. Sean Combs decided not to take the stand. Did that pay off in the end? It depends on who you ask. In the end, though, yes, those counts 3 and 5 guilty, yes. Transportation to engage in prostitution relating to Ventura and Jane, and not guilty on 1, 2, and 4. Throughout this trial, the one thing people have been saying is this was a larger-than-life, to some a cultural icon, Sean Combs, that he was well on his way to becoming a billionaire at one point. It was Cassie Ventura that kind of opened the Pandora's box into this very private life that they lived, that she testified on the stand again for 4 days during week 1 of this trial. Her attorney is here in the courthouse today. He is watching all of this, of course. She is married now. She gave birth to her 3rd child shortly after she finished testifying here in Lower Manhattan. She, of course, as well as many others, are watching what happens. Now, remember, what has happened here now, that'll also play some role, we're not sure what, into all of the civil lawsuits. That's a separate matter that Sean Combs is facing, dozens of civil lawsuits from men and women. So that is the next chapter. What will happen next? He will be transferred from here to MDC. What typically we will find a sentencing date. That won't be today. We will not learn how long he will be in prison. That will be a separate day, a sentencing date. I'm sure we will have just as many people here outside and inside the courtroom for that. Once we learn the sentence he will be faced, again, we were saying a maximum of 10 years in prison on those 2 counts, consecutively, concurrently. That's not clear at this point, but at that sentencing date, we'll learn where he will, in the country, serve out his sentence. So there's still a lot to go with this, but this is a major hurdle, the jury handing down that verdict today. One other thing, the fact that they were found not guilty, Combs was found not guilty on that racketeering conspiracy. There's going to be an appeals process, of course, in all of this. How all of these mixed verdicts will play into that, that's something the defense will definitely take a close look at. Back to you guys.
They certainly will. Kimberly, stand by for us. Thank you so much. We want to go now to Mike Marza, who is in our newsroom. You've been communicating with Darla Miles, who is inside of the courtroom. What is she saying?
We have a whole team down there, Pedro, as you would imagine, and they're inside the courtroom watching what's happening. And what is happening is that the Sean Combs defense team is now asking the judge for Mr. Combs to be released right now, saying obviously the conditions of the trial have changed, and so they're asking for him to be released. We know Sean Combs, as soon as that verdict was read, making praying hands as the jury got up to leave when they were excused, and the relief that must be going through his head at this point is just less than an hour ago, he was facing the potential of spending his life behind bars, and now we'll see what that sentence will be. We don't have a clarification or a decision just yet if Sean Combs will be allowed to leave, but I want to ask Shauna, on a case like this with the history of Sean Combs, he's 55, what do you anticipate the judge saying or moving forward, one with a sentence, but then also with the ability to leave to wait out the rest of what he's going to face?
Well, what's interesting, Mike, is that the argument was built on the idea that he has this entire network, which is why they were charging him with conspiracy, to tamper with witnesses, which was one of the underlying predicate crimes, and that he was a danger to society. That was the whole reason his bond was revoked and that he was put inside, as opposed to being out while he was waiting for trial. So now they have a very good argument, because what this verdict says is that we don't see that. So now he has a very good argument. Whether or not the judge will allow that is questionable. The judge will still say that he has means. He may, the prosecution is going to argue that he has means. He may be a flight risk. There's other arguments to be made, so I expect that the judge is going to take some time to make this consideration.
Shauna, to that point, just some more information as it's trickling out of that courtroom there. We understand that the attorney for Mr. Combs says that he would be willing to put up a cash bond of $1 million that is co-signed by 3 what they described to be financially responsible people, and Mr. Combs nodded his head as that argument was made. We also understand, according to the defense team, that Mr. Combs' plane is currently in Maui, so there are some logistics on exactly what would happen if that were granted or how that would be granted. But we right now are also waiting to hear from this jury, these 8 men and 4 women that served 8 weeks, 2 months listening to all of this and came to the conclusion that they came to, and what the sticking point was on count 1 and what was going through their mind. We remember that there was a problem about an hour into deliberations with a juror who was called juror number 25 about not following the judge's instruction. And what was that like in that room with the weight of this case and the moment that they made that ultimate decision just moments ago this morning to say what they said about convicting Sean Combs of 2 of the 5 counts, but acquitting him on the most serious count. Shauna, as we move forward now, what is the timeline of all of this? Because we know court so often is a lengthy process. And we also should mention, too, that this is the criminal side of what Sean Combs is facing. He's also facing other civil engagements as well, right?
Absolutely. So first we're going to have to go through sentencing. This has to go to the Board of Prisons. They're going to give a recommendation. The judge is going to look at that. The prosecution is probably going to push for a maximum penalty. The defense is going to make arguments as to why that shouldn't be. And then there's going to typically be a hearing. So we're looking at another couple of weeks, maybe even months before this is decided, which is why they're really going to push to have him released in the meantime. As you see, as I mentioned before, they're going to try to combat these arguments that he is a flight risk, that he's a danger to society. That's why they're looking to post this bond. Regarding after this, there are a number of civil cases that he is still facing. This is going to really assist him. What these other civil cases were hoping for and why they wanted to see how the criminal charges were going to come out is that a guilty charge leans towards the civil, whereas now that we have these not guilty, that may very much weaken some of these cases.
And Assistant U.S. Attorney Maureen Comey, as you would imagine, arguing against releasing Combs right now, saying that he has committed, quote, a litany of crimes. While incarcerated, he shows no respect for the law. Again, a quote from the Assistant U.S. Attorney Maureen Comey. And she added, telling the judge, reminding the judge that Mr. Combs still faces 20 years in prison. So we'll see how that plays out and as we watch. But guys, let's bring the panel back in, because when when we were talking about this case day after day after day, it really became really hard to follow in a lot of these parts, and it will be interesting to hear from the jury what they believed and what they did not believe. And with the indication of the counts 2 and through 5, we got an indication last night of where they may be leaning as we watch outside the courthouse now, as we expect some high-profile exits. We expect to hear from some of the attorneys and see what happens. But guys, as I toss it back to you and we get more information, we'll see what happens with Mr. Combs. But the jury, what a fascinating conversation that will be with them if they're willing to talk and share what happened inside that deliberation room.
Sure. We're going to go to Phil Tate, who is back at the courthouse and has a lot of people behind him. Phil.
You can imagine that scene.
Yes.
Yeah, Michelle, Pedro, this is a completely different look as to what we saw about 2 hours ago. As we know, deliberations began about 9 a.m. and it was just about an hour when we started to come onto the air where we got that verdict that Sean Combs is found guilty on some of these charges. Outside of the courthouse here, we're just going to have our photographer push in for a second. Outside of the courthouse, it became flooded with people. There were even some screams from even some folks as that verdict came out. Many of these people are familiar faces as they've been showing up for the duration of the trial. Many of them are streaming, catching those arrivals of the family, the defense attorneys, and all of those who have been involved in the case, including the prosecution. Again, right now you're taking a live look outside of the federal courthouse. There is quite the scene out here. Again, when that verdict did come down, that there were many people starting just to yell, more people just flooding onto the sidewalk, just trying to capture a glimpse or to find out exactly what exactly happened inside of that courthouse. Again, we're following all the details as to what's happening inside of the courtroom, guys.
So much. So now that his attorneys are saying, hey, you did speak about because the racketeering charges was one of the reasons why his bond was revoked.
Correct.
Now that it's dropped, do you think he will be released?
This judge is very conservative. I think that if the defense can make a strong enough argument and put up enough collateral and assets, I think this judge may potentially allow him to go on his own recognizance at this point. I think because now that we've taken the RICO out, we've taken witness tampering out. We've taken trafficking out, the largest crimes. This transportation for prostitution is much more of a procedural crime in the sense that you pay someone, they're engaged. There's no violence in that. There's nothing that's harmful to the public. So I think the likelihood is this judge may allow him to post bond.
There's just no one to influence anymore.
Right.
Correct.
And because the toughest charges, the charges that had the highest penalties to them, the RICO charge is gone. So the charges that he was found guilty on, max sentence is 10 years, and then the second charge is max sentence is also 10 years.
He can face up to 20 years, Sam. He can face up to 20. You don't think
weigh in on that?
Because there's two victims, so they can do them consecutively, or concurrently. We don't know which one, but if they do it consecutively, that is 10 and 10, which will be total of 20.
But do you think?
Will it be the max?
Do you see the max in this?
I do not see the max. I think the prosecution is going to push for the max because they've lost the higher charges. I do not believe that they will get that because that has to be supported by the record. You have to show that this person is either had an extensive violent past, that there are other things that are mitigating factors. There were children involved that would increase that. If there are no aggravating factors, he does not qualify to be at that high end.
At the 10-year mark.
At the 10-year.
Kimberly Richardson joining us, Eyewitness News. Kimberly Richardson joining us with more information. Kimberly.
Yes, and speaking of whether Sean Combs walks out of this courtroom today in the next couple of hours, the judge just did say he will decide whether Combs gets released today. He said the decision may take some time, including giving the lawyers time to write letters arguing for and against his release, but it will happen sometime today. Prosecutors asked for, quote, a few hours. The government says it plans to, quote, look for significant incarceration for Combs. Remember, he's been in since he was arrested. He did not. He tried several times to apply for bail. Those packages were shot down. He turned down a plea deal. So he's been at MDC over in Brooklyn for several months now. Whether he walks out of this courtroom this morning, if he does sometime today, that will be a scene. As we all know, Sean Combs is not shy. He is a showman. Members of the public still adore him. Many of them are here today. So when he walks out of this courtroom, that will be a moment in this whole saga, along with him, who's been here every day. Just a few family members, his 3 sons, his 3 daughters, his mom, other relatives. They will be behind him, no doubt, claiming victory and showing that. So we shall see. It will be a very interesting moment if and when today, if Sean Combs walks out of this courthouse. Back to you guys.
Just to wrap up exactly what you said into tight sentences, the judge has just said that it is possible that he will make a decision today, that Sean Combs, who has been in prison since September, may walk through those doors today?
I know, right? Yes, the judge again saying he wants to give the lawyers some time to write letters and to argue for and against his release. But yes, prosecutors asked for a few hours to do that.
We're going to go to you in a second, but again, lawyers have until 1 o'clock to file those letters releasing Combs. This is new information just into our newsroom as we speak. When the judge mentioned Combs not wanting to go to MDC, Combs, they said, vigorously shook his head and made prayer hands at the judge. The judge then told Combs that you're going to have to cool your heels in the courthouse for a while. Again, 1 o'clock, lawyers have to file their letters as to why he should and should not be released. And when you hear that, 1 o'clock, is that enough time? I mean, it seems like several hours.
This is a standard argument, and you either have the aggravating factors that the prosecution is going to be looking for, or you don't. Here is where this judge has cut it down the middle, and he is fair. Regardless of Sean Combs' celebrity status or not, the judge is going to go according to the letter of the law. And I do not see the aggravating factors that are going to require him to keep him imprisoned at this time.
It's interesting you say that, because his defense attorney did plead to the judge for the release, arguing to prosecutors, saying that prosecutors are overplaying the allegations. That's the exact term that they use. Overplaying. He is going to have his life back, is what his attorney said. He treasures the opportunity he has been given. So those are the exact words from his defense attorneys. So you agree with the attorney?
I agree. I think that this has been overreaching from the beginning as far as the RICO. In my opinion, they didn't meet the legal standard for RICO, and I think that's what the jury told them. And that's the purpose of a jury. A purpose of a jury is to find the truth within the evidence that is presented. And so when we look at this and we look at what his criminal history is, like I said, I don't see the aggravating factors. Initially, typically, it's going to be a minor, something egregious, something that shocks the conscience, whether it's some sort of force or there was aggression. None of that is present under the charges he was found guilty of. So it's going to be very hard for the judge to say, we're just going to keep you. Also, we have to remember that it was also based on the reason he was granted no bail was based on the idea that he was a threat to society and to the witnesses. The jury has found no witness tampering. So as right now, the judge really has to do a balancing act.
We want to remind everyone before we go ask Mike what's going on upstairs that Darla Miles has been in the courtroom, was there for the moment. We're waiting Darla to get outside, and then we'll get a fresh perspective on what actually went down and how it went down. She saw it all in the courtroom. But Mike, you're upstairs in the newsroom?
Yeah, what a fascinating front row seat she has to what just played out in court. We're hearing what just happened is court was adjourned as we wait for this 1 o'clock deadline for the attorneys to present their arguments on whether or not Sean Combs should be released. But at that point, Mr. Combs, again, Sean Diddy Combs, got down in the middle of a courtroom on his knees, appearing to pray as some of his lawyers started hugging. He has an attorney team of 6 in the courtroom, all huddling and hugging, and then that was to a massive round of applause, cheering in the gallery. Marshals then escorted Sean Combs out of the courtroom to another massive round of applause. You mentioned Darla Miles has been inside studying the jury's faces, giving great indication on what it was like to be inside, and I can only imagine, as she describes, the moments that we just talked about and what has transpired here this morning, guys.
All right, Mike, thank you so much for that, especially when you learn those details from what's happening inside the courtroom. We do want to get to Phil Tate live for us outside of the courtroom. Phil, you know, so not guilty on 3 of 5 counts, the most serious counts here, but could possibly still serve jail time. We don't know how long it'll be, maybe up to 20 years, maybe less. What does Diddy's legacy, you think, means to New York City? We're talking about a man who has received the key to the city from Harlem, grew up in Westchester, a New York guy here, and he has been found guilty, but there was so much detail, Phil, in this case that was leaked out. I mean, not leaked, but, you know, we know about. So what do you take of his legacy here in the city?
Yeah, Pedro, let's just start off by saying that Sean Combs is New York City born and bred. There are several people, thousands of people who have much support behind Sean Combs. Moments ago, we actually just saw a man hold up a Sean Combs shirt. That was a very, very popular brand. We saw Sean Combs, he took over the world of fashion. We're talking about wines and spirits. We're talking about the world of entertainment. He had popular shows from Making the Band to The Four, looking for the next generation of young artists, those who were just trying to do half, if not more, of what he was able to do in his career. We even saw him take on several roles, even as an actor. Raisin in the Sun, that was another popular film that he has been in. But of course, when things come down like this, and as you all have been saying, this has definitely been a fall from grace, especially from someone who has been a staple here in New York. We also saw him get behind several educational endeavors. He had made that pledge to even Howard University that was then returned back to him. He also had that charter school up in Harlem. That was another moment of celebration for him, that he hadn't just had a celebrity, but was also using his celebrity and philanthropic efforts as well, and looking really to help those coming up behind him as well. We also saw him use his legacy, being able to help his family, even his sons, as they would want to get into the music industry and as well as the entertainment industry. But one thing that I can tell you is that outside of the courtroom, as we've been standing out here, many people have been cheering. As I shared with you moments ago, there was even that gentleman that had that Sean Combs t-shirt up, and that really was just a clear indication that this was just one of the several industries that Sean Combs had taken over. But as we know, over the past year, his life has taken a complete twist, and much of what has been built has unfortunately fallen. Guys?
Thank you. So complicated life, complicated legacy as we move forward, certainly. But as you said, New York City born and bred. We're looking at a live picture of the courthouse, waiting to see Sean Combs' family leave. So, and a lot of other people. There may be news conferences. There will be news conferences with attorneys speaking on both sides.
Yeah, we'll go right to that. I do want to ask Shauna really quickly, because he was talking about the legacy of Sean Combs. And when we were on here yesterday on set talking, we spoke about this. His defense decided not to call him up to the stand, did not call for witnesses, and they said this is not a guy, who's an angel. He has his issues, but what he did was not a crime.
Correct, because just having bad character or having bad habits or an alternate sexual lifestyle is not a crime, and that is what the jury came back and determined. That is not criminal, and what he was doing under those charges was not criminal. And so I think, is anything going to be the same? No, but people will know now that those things are not criminal, and it is what it is.
So he's already been detained for 9 months. Could that
Correct.
be time served?
That is going to be counted as time
Right.
served. Absolutely.
We have Mike Marza in the newsroom right now. You have a statement from, I believe it's Cassie Ventura's representation?
And Pedro, when you think about it, this all got started because of Cassie Ventura filing that lawsuit against Sean Combs that triggered the avalanche of accusations. And the attorney for Ms. Ventura just issued a statement, and I'll read just a little bit. She echoes that, saying this entire criminal process started when our client, Cassie Ventura, had the courage to file her civil complaint in November of 2023. This case proved that change is long overdue, and we will continue to fight on behalf of survivors. To paraphrase this statement just issued by the attorney for Cassie Ventura. And when you think about the civil side of this, Cassie Ventura was paid a settlement of $20 million, $10 million from that Intercontinental Hotel in that horrific beating that was captured on video in 2016 that became an integral part of this case and was talked about a lot, played a lot in the court. And it was Cassie Ventura, prosecutors alleging, escaping one of these freak-off sessions, and it was the violence that they pointed to. And now you have Cassie Ventura echoing the statements that we heard so often in the Me Too movement. And Shauna, you and I were talking about this on a different program yesterday, and it was interesting as this court was playing out, as the trial was playing out, that Cassie Ventura and Jane and another woman named Mia all had their own attorneys, just giving you an indication of just how complex and layered all of these accusations were. But that $20 million settlement did become part of the testimony, and defense attorneys argued to have a portion of that reread to the jury, ultimately failed in that attempt. But this is a huge part of this, because none of this likely would have happened had it not been for Cassie Ventura's civil suit, right? Absolutely.
This got started, and the federal prosecutors determined the charge after that lawsuit came out. This is what it was based on. Yeah. And so the civil standard is not as high as the criminal standard. And that's what we have to remember, is that it's only a preponderance when you talk about the civil burden of proof. But when you talk about life and liberty, it is beyond a reasonable doubt. And so that's the difference we have here.
The most famous case you go back to, I think of, is O.J. Simpson.
Absolutely.
Exactly right.
Absolutely.
That's the biggest case you think?
Yes.
So, and there is a lot more court time in this. Like today, we're not going to say this is done and we're finished, because we may make that sentencing by 1 o'clock this afternoon, but there's likely,
or at least if he can be released.
Right.
Right.
There may be an appeal to this decision.
Correct.
Right. And
Absolutely.
then we have those additional lawsuits, the civil lawsuits to come. So even though this may kind of, we may have a decision on these counts, this isn't the end of the court drama.
No, it is not. It's not the end of the court drama, but what this is the closing of the trial. And the verdict, and once we have that, is really the end of the trial and what's going to happen. From here on out, we're looking at consequences. We're looking at the sentencing, and we're looking at all these additional civil suits that have been filed.
Got it. And we are standing by waiting for Darla Miles, who just exited the courthouse, and we'll get to her in just a second.
Pedro, one more thing I should just mention in the context of everything that we're watching unfold today. If you remember, if you've been in New York for quite some time, you remember Sean Diddy Combs faced a shooting charge, a gun charge, and it was a trial that happened back in 2001 for a 1999 club shooting that injured 3 people.
Right.
He was ultimately acquitted in 2001, but it was a high-profile case, and so you have him more than 20 years later back in a courtroom, hearing what happened, acquitted on some of these charges, but convicted on 2.
Yeah, we all remember that that court case from what, 2001, I believe it was, around there. Shauna, so when you hear the 20 years, up to 20 years in prison, we're standing by and we're looking at that number. It sounds like a big number, but I want to reiterate, even with that past that Sean Combs had, being in courtrooms before, that does not play a factor in the decision making of today?
No, because he has to have a criminal history that are convictions. If I remember correctly, that was an acquittal. It's not just charges. So if he has not been convicted of any other crimes, he has no violent history under the law as charged, and he also does not have any aggravating factors that the judge can find, then this is going to go towards the lower end. I mean, I don't expect to see more than 3 to 5 years under either given charge, to be very honest, because that's not what this charge or his background calls for.
So let's get to Darla Miles right now. She just exited the courtroom. You've been in there all morning long. You watched everything play out over the past couple of months. Tell us, what was that moment like when that verdict was given out?
A lot to unpack here, Pedro. First of all, when we found out there was a verdict, obviously there's that 20-minute window where there's lots of tension. So you saw all of the attorneys file in. Every single attorney for Sean Combs could not sit down. They were standing in the well with their arms folded. Mark Agnifilo was pacing back and forth. The family returned to the courtroom. Sean Combs returned to the courtroom. He said a few words to his family saying it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay. Now this is after he led a moment of prayer earlier this morning when they were in court. So now the jury is seated in the courtroom. Sean Combs, and actually let me just go back, because when we were waiting for the verdict to come in, Sean Combs was sitting in his chair reading Psalms 18. It was a printout of Psalms 18. So again, he had that moment of quiet, that moment of meditation. He was still waiting to find out. Obviously, there were four verdicts reached yesterday and then the other one this morning. So the jury is seated. They say they have found a verdict. And so as they were reading down the counts, again, Sean Combs was not looking forward. He was kind of in that state, that stillness, that meditative state that we've seen him. And the first count, not guilty, he goes, yeah, that was the first thing. You could hear a little bit of cheering from the family and the crowd. People were saying yes. The second count, he just kind of fist pumped. Now, when the third count, the sex trafficking, the Mann Act, the interstate prostitution, when that guilty verdict was read, he was kind of holding his head like this. And you could see he was shocked. He did not see that one coming. You could see kind of like that kinetic shock run through his body. But then when they went through the next count, the sex trafficking for Jane, not guilty. Then the prostitution for Jane, he and Tinny Garagos, they kind of had like a moment. They were sitting next to each other. They grabbed hands. They were holding hands, kind of like, like this, pumping each other's fists, like congratulations. All of the attorneys, all of his defense attorneys who were pacing around, nervous before the verdict was read. You could see smiles on the face of Brian Steele, smiles on the face of Mark Agnifilo. Then Combs began to turn around and speak to his family and saying, I'm coming home, it's going to be okay. And then he actually started thanking the jury. He started nodding his head, thanking the jury, that same eye contact that we'd seen at the beginning of the trial that he'd been admonished for. He did that again. Now, but it's not clear if any of the jurors looked back and acknowledged him. I didn't really see anyone look back to acknowledge him thanking the jury, but he was just thanking the jury, and he would continuously look back at his family. At one point, his son Justin, when the jury left the room, he stood up, he grabbed a book in his hand, he held the hand up like, thank you, lots of prayers from the Combs family. Now, here's the issue. This is, again, of course, not over, because his attorney, Mark Agnifilo, is asking that he be released on bail in light of being acquitted of the most serious charges. So then again, you see the attorneys going tit for tat. Mark Agnifilo says in light of these charges, he's been acquitted. He deserves to be returned home to his family. He deserves to go back to Two-Star Island in Florida. That's when Maureen Comey stood up and said, listen, Your Honor, these are still serious counts. He was acquitted. However, you heard extensive testimony about the threats. You heard extensive testimony about the violence, and those are still underlying factors. Now, this is when you saw Tinny Garagos was livid at this argument, especially in light of the verdict that had just been read. She leaned over to Mark Agnifilo, and she was just like fierce in her face, like, she was mad, like pointing at Maureen Comey, speaking to Mark Agnifilo, just really upset that it appeared that the prosecution was still going hard to keep Sean Combs detained. Now, when the jury left and we were all dismissed from the court, that was another powerful moment. Sean Combs dropped to his knees. He dropped to his knees where his chair is and just bowed his head and just prayed. It was about 2 or 3 minutes. He just dropped, and you could just tell he was relieved. He was thankful. And, you know, you just can't really emphasize it enough. Now, typically, this is not what marshals will allow a person to do after conviction. His family stood up in that moment, kind of acknowledging that he was on his knees with his head bowed. And this, now, remind you, it's also an armchair, so it's a pretty robust chair. And he's just on his knees, praying in the chair. When he stood up, the family cheered, lots of cheers. It was kind of like the end of the Super Bowl for this family and for this legal team. They were cheering. Tinny Garagos, Mark Agnifilo, group hugs.
Well, his family right now is coming out of the courtroom behind you. We've just seen his mother leading.
Janice Combs walking out the door.
Leading the group out, but we also saw Christian Combs, Justin Combs, as well as his daughters leaving the courtroom.
His
right
6 children coming out. You know, you have to wonder, this is a very different picture of Sean Combs than we have seen, certainly for the last 2 months, played out in court. Darla, I wanted to ask you, Darla, do you see contrition in Sean Combs today, since you're talking about so much faith and
or was
holding
it
up a
just
Bible?
relief?
And was it relief? Was it, what do you see a changed man? I mean, I know it's your opinion, but this is certainly a different Sean Combs than was portrayed in court day after day.
Well, first of all, let me tell you, I was actually just in the elevator and in the hallway with the family, the children, as they left. And obviously, we've been in trial together. And as they were walking out of court, you could see them really happy about the verdict as they were waiting for the vehicle. So I was just in there with them before we came out. And the family, obviously, very pleased. You know, Sean Combs has maintained he was innocent the entire time. So I don't believe contrition is the word. But you definitely see humility. You see a man of faith. You see his family, the level of family support. There's definitely a tale of 2 Sean Combs, but I don't think that's new, right? I think at the beginning of the trial, they said this is a man who's dynamic, he inspires people, he's a music mogul, he's touched every life of the people who have worked for him, but there is also a second side of Sean Combs that you don't know, and that was literally in the prosecution's opening arguments. So to say that, you know, I wouldn't speak on contrition. I don't think that's the word, but you see a man who has been praying, and you see a man who feels like his prayers have been answered.
Job of painting every second from when the jury walked in the room to when those charges were read to when they're discussing about maybe possibly releasing Sean Combs from jail today. So you were at the point right there where the lawyers were at each other, kind of looking at each other in that argument. Did you feel like one side had a stronger argument standing there?
Again, not a legal analyst, but Judge Arun Subramanian asked Mark Agnifilo, what does that look like? Does he walk out of court today? And he said, in the world, according to Mark Agnifilo, actually, yes. And we would, you know, obviously there's some paperwork that needs to be filed. We need to go through some legal proceedings, but absolutely, yes, this is a day where we think he should walk out of this courtroom. And so then Judge Subramanian asked Combs, I can imagine, Mr. Combs, you don't want to go back to MDC. And he started shaking his head no like that. And he's been known to kind of communicate with the judge like that. There was a little bit of laughter in the courtroom when he was just like, no way, I don't want to go back into the courtroom. I also want to share this with you. I was in the elevator with Mark Agnifilo after the legal wrangling back and forth, because what is now going to happen, both sides have to submit a letter to the court why they believe he deserves to be released on bail today, why they believe he should still be held in custody. Mark Agnifilo is asking for a $1 million bond with 3 family members who are in court today. So they have resolved to get it done today. So court is still not dismissed. We still have to return to the court at 1 o'clock this afternoon to determine or to learn whether or not this bail application will be approved or not. And if he does, in fact, walk out of the front doors today. But I was in the elevator with Mark Agnifilo. He was asked by one reporter, how do you feel? He says, I've never had this feeling in 34 years. And so then I asked him, well, what does that feeling feel like? And he kind of thought about it, and he says, I'm relieved that I'm not miserable. And so that was one perspective from Mark Agnifilo. The other part of that is Doug Wigdor. He's seated directly in front of me in the courthouse. He's been here every single day of the deliberations. He is the attorney for Cassie Ventura. He's the one who filed that November 2023 bombshell lawsuit that really spurred this investigative, this federal investigation into action. And as they read the verdict, he just sat on his phone with his head down. He didn't flinch. He didn't look. This is obviously not the verdict, not guilty on sex trafficking for his client, Cassie Ventura. Speaking to him privately over the last few days in jury deliberations, he was disappointed, and some of the arguments he heard come from the defense during closing arguments. He said, you know, Cassie liked to have sex. That's interesting. A modern-day love story. That's interesting. So he was really disturbed by some of the closing arguments that Mark Agnifilo gave on behalf of Sean Combs, which ultimately ended up being convincing for this jury that acquitted him on the 2 sex trafficking charges, the one for Cassie Ventura and the one for Jane.
Inside, thank you to Darla Miles that she was inside court throughout this 8-week process. If you're just now joining us here on Eyewitness News alongside Sandra Bookman, I'm Mike Marza. In what a bombshell day, finally the conclusion of this Sean Diddy Combs trial that had 28 days of testimony and more than 20 witnesses from the prosecution. And Sean Combs convicted on 2 counts, Sandra, but acquitted on 3.
Yeah, and the 2 counts, he was convicted on the lesser charges. Am I correct in characterizing that the lesser of the 5 charges?
Let's bring in ABC News legal contributor Shauna Lloyd, who has been here throughout this process. Take us through exactly what this means and what this verdict means moving forward for Sean Combs.
So right now, we know that he is not guilty of the 3 largest charges, which carry life sentences. One is the RICO charge, one is trafficking for Cassie Ventura, and trafficking for... He has been acquitted, so they are off the table. Those each carried a life sentence. So now we have the remaining 2 charges. That is the transportation for prostitution related to Cassie Ventura and transportation for prostitution related to Jane. Those each carried up to 10 years potential. They are 2 different victims, so the judge has the option of making these terms consecutive, which means they'd be served back to back. Now, we do know that the judge has to balance. When we look at sentencing, they look at other things. Is this defendant, do they have a history of violent convictions? Were there extenuating, aggravating circumstances? Were there minors involved? There are other aggravating factors that I expect that the prosecution is going to argue, because they're already indicated they're looking for the maximum penalty. The defense is going to say he has no major criminal history. He was acquitted on his last charge. He is not a flight risk. He has extensive ties to the community. Therefore, he should be on the lower end of those spectrums.
Will they consider it things like that video that was shown of Cassie Ventura being beaten in a hallway? Are those things likely to be considered when this sentencing goes forward?
I believe that the prosecution is going to put those forth and ask the judge to say, even though he was acquitted, we know that this is who he is. I expect that the defense is going to argue, Judge, this was over 10 years ago. This is not who my defendant is. He expressed remorse. He's gone through counseling. That is in the past. And so I expect that those are the arguments they're going to make as to why it should be towards the lower or towards the higher end of the spectrum.
Here is the video that started it all. It was captured inside of an Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles in 2016, and prosecutors said that is Cassie Ventura being beaten after she escaped or left a sexual encounter dubbed a freak-off. What we're waiting on now is a deadline that is going to come in about 2 hours for both sides, the prosecution and the defense attorneys, to argue whether or not Sean Combs should be released today. Defense attorneys saying that he could be released on $1 million guaranteed bond. We'll see how that plays out. But Shauna, if you're just now joining us, you get the alert on your phone from Eyewitness News and you say, okay, there's a verdict. Take us through what the prosecution was hoping to prove and where they succeeded and where they failed.
So the prosecution was hoping to prove, let's start with RICO, that one, there was a criminal enterprise that was used to further his needs, which they were terming his sexual desires, and that they took and made predicate criminal acts in furtherance of this conspiracy. Those are those arson, kidnapping, bribery, all those charges that we saw. So that's the RICO charge. The trafficking is that related to Jane or to Cassie, that by force, fraud, or coercion, he moved them from state to state in order to partake in commercial sex acts. They did not prove either of those charges, neither the trafficking related to Cassie nor Jane, nor did they prove the RICO. The last charge is a transportation for prostitution. That is basically moving someone through interstate commerce, which is from state to state, in order for them to engage in criminal prostitution. And this was proven. Now, the reason this was proven was because that was the strongest evidence they had. They could show that these were clearly escorts, they were going there for the purposes of commercial sex acts, and that they were paid for these sex acts. They showed bank records, flight records, all of which was paid through Sean Combs.
And even going into this trial, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, me who knows nothing legally, but I thought that RICO charge is hard to prove. So why would the prosecution even go there?
You know, it's always an interesting thing. The prosecution and the federal prosecutors get to make their charging instructions as they see fit. They saw this as a criminal enterprise. When I looked at this from the beginning, as you know, I shared with both of you, I don't see RICO. And the reason I don't see RICO is because the individuals that you're alleging are the enterprise are his bodyguards and his personal assistants and his chief of staff, who is Christina Coram. Your personal assistants are paid to do and bring the things that you ask for. So the idea that they consented to be a part of a criminal conspiracy because they brought baby oil and Astroglide to a hotel, I don't see that. That doesn't meet the legal standard. And I think that's what the jury saw. A bodyguard, they're paid for your protection. So the idea that they were complicit in your crimes because they were standing outside of a room or standing near you, that to me does not hold legally. And I think that's what the jury saw as well.
That's the argument the defense tried to make too, is that if this is an enterprise, only one person is charged.
Correct. That is another thing.
We are going to throw it back out to Kimberly Richardson, who has been one of the reporters following this trial from the very beginning. This all happened so much faster today, Kimberly, than I thought most people expected.
And Sandra, not only did today happen fast, but just in general, the deliberations started Monday late morning at about 11:30. So we were only, 2 days in with this amount of charges and the seriousness of the charge. It was surprising that they even came back yesterday with that note 6 at the end of the day saying they had reached a verdict on counts 2 through 5. Let's back up and see how we got here, how we got to this point. This all started in November of 2023 when Cassie Ventura, Combs' ex-girlfriend, filed that civil lawsuit. She was alleging that she was trapped in a cycle of violence. Well, the very next day, November 17th, Combs settled that. We learned during the second day of testimony, Cassie said that it was settled for $20 million. Fast forward to March of 2024. Those were when we had those early morning raids at Combs' estates in Los Angeles and Miami. Coverage was wall to wall. We saw the feds going into these mansions and getting much of the evidence that we saw throughout this 7-week trial. We saw the cases of baby oil. We saw the lubricant. We saw the weapons. We saw all of that was presented to the jury. May 17th of 2024, that's when this other bombshell piece of evidence that came out in this case was released. That's when the hotel video from 2016 in LA, Cassie Ventura and Sean Combs inside that hotel. Cassie maintains that she was trying to leave a freak off, that there was a paid male escort in the room. She said that Combs assaulted her and she was trying to get away. That was a very big point of evidence in this case. Again, in court, we learned that Combs paid off the security guard $100,000 to, quote, make it go away. Of course, it was leaked. May 19th, Combs went on Instagram and Facebook. He apologized for the assault. He said his behavior was unacceptable. Then September 16th of 2024, that was another huge moment. Why Combs is still in custody at this moment. That's when he was arrested in a hotel in New York City. He had come to New York City. He said he told all the attorneys involved, all the investigators, that he was coming here. He was here with his family. Later on, the feds say they found evidence in that hotel room here in New York City of potential freak-offs. There was baby oil, there was drugs. When he was arrested then, he was taken right into custody. He was tried to put together several bail packages, his legal team, to get him out on bail so that he wouldn't have to stay in the notorious prison in Brooklyn where he has been. Those all failed, and then the next step was a big plea deal. They presented a plea deal. We don't know the details of that, but he turned it down. Then we got here, May 12th, 2025, when testimony began after jury selection, and that's where he has been ever since, his family coming and going. Again, a huge moment, not just for Sean Combs and his family, but for the alleged victims in this case. Those Cassie Ventura who came forward, the woman that testified by the name Jane. There was Combs' former assistant, personal assistant. That was Mia. She testified under that. There were 34 prosecution witnesses that every day took the stand and mapped this all out. In the end, the jury, those 8 men and 4 women, didn't buy all of it. They bought some of it. They did not convict Combs on some of those serious charges. So now we wait. We wait and see at 1 o'clock, again, the deadline for those attorneys to get the letters in. Will he walk out of here just remarkable, or will he be transferred and held into his sentencing? This is all still very developing, but a really big also for the world of hip-hop. Many had speculated this case is going to blow the can open on the overall industry of hip-hop. What was going on behind the closed doors? What was going on behind the scenes? Combs is a huge player. He was at the top of his game when this all went down. He was surrounded by people that were very influential, but as we have seen, one thing in this case that's interesting, people have backed away from him ever since that arrest when these charges started to come out. He's kind of been isolated. The only one, Kanye West, who briefly came down here to the courthouse. We will see what happens on the backside of this. If and when he is released, when he comes out, after he serves his sentence, what does his future look like? Of course, we have mentioned he has all of those civil suits, the suits that he has to contend with. So still a lot to go, but a huge hurdle crossed today with the jury handing down that verdict. Sandra?
Thank you very much, Kimberly. We're getting some additional information right now about the bail package that they're trying to offer. Defense attorneys are offering, trying to get Sean Combs out of jail after this verdict. One of the things they've done is proposed a $1 million bond to be co-signed by what they call 3 financially responsible people. He has served, what, about a year in jail?
You know, about 9 months.
9
right?
months.
Yep.
9 months, almost a year. I have to ask you legally, what is your feeling, Shauna, about the potential for him walking out of that courthouse this afternoon?
I think it's very high because we have to look at, let's go back to basics. What is the purpose of bail? The purpose of bail is to ensure that a defendant shows up for his court hearings. So when we determine how and what makes bail, why do they set it? They set it based on several factors. Whether or not you're a risk to society, what is your flight risk, whether or not you have financial resources. These are the things that they're looking at when they're making that determination. And so when we look at that compared to what the charges are, because severity of charges is also one of the factors, there's a high likelihood that he could walk out of that courtroom today.
Which would be fascinating. It's 11:11 right now, so this deadline is at 1 p.m. And Sanders, we've been looking through these pieces of information that are coming out. Combs' travel would potentially be confined to the states where he has homes. We're talking about Miami, specifically Star Island, a very exclusive part of Miami. And he would have to surrender his passport. Prosecutors arguing that he is a flight risk, to your point. And we just heard Kimberly mention how all of this got started with that Cassie Ventura video as she was beaten in the Intercontinental Hotel back in 2016. And we're now hearing from Cassie Ventura's attorney about what played out in court today.
Pleased that he's been held responsible for something, which is something that hasn't happened in his lifetime. And, you know, we're hopeful that ultimately he receives a substantial sentence for what he's done. And, you know, we're pleased that Cassie's brought to light everything that has happened in this trial. I just spoke with her and with the U.S. Attorney's Office team. And she's in a good place. She's pleased that, again, that the jury has found him liable, guilty of 2 federal crimes.
And we should point out that Cassie Ventura was awarded a $20 million settlement. I believe 10 from the hotel and 10 from Sean Combs himself as part of that lawsuit.
your reaction. He is what you'd expect to hear from an attorney representing one of the key witnesses against a defendant.
Absolutely. What he said was standard by playbook. He wanted to have seen Sean Combs held responsible for a federal crime. And everyone on as far as the victim's lawyers, as well as the prosecution, is going to be looking to make sure that he ends on the higher end of that sentencing scheme. And so that's a position that we expect them to take.
All right, Shauna Lloyd, hang tight as we're still sorting through this new information. Let's go back to Darla now. She was in the courtroom and has been in the courtroom for 8 weeks now. Darla, what can you shed some more light on exactly how it all played out?
You know, so this is a 10-minute time frame from when the jury was seated in the courtroom to return the verdict. They came in at like 10:15. They left at 10:25. So it was a really short time frame, but a lot happened within that time frame. And as they read, Sean Combs was sitting in this armchair that he's been sitting in the entire time at this really large defense table. So the way things are laid out in this courtroom, you have the judge and the judge at the bench. You have 3 tables. The prosecution's at the very front table, and there's a center table where both the prosecution and defense share a table, and then this, majestic, large third table where he and all of his attorneys sit. You have Mark Agnifilo, Tinny Garagos, Sean Combs, Brian Steele, Alexander Shapiro, and then Mr. Driscoll. That's the way they sit. Sometimes it's alternating seats. So as the verdict is being read, Combs still has his head down, and they say, count 1, racketeering, not guilty. He fist pump, right? Still looking down. The second verdict, nah, not guilty. He keeps his head down, he nods. The third time, his hand is like this, and they say guilty, they read the guilty verdict, and, he was shocked. He was very shocked at a guilty verdict, especially since there were 2 preceding not guilty verdicts. By the time they got to count 4 and count 5, the not guilty and guilty verdicts, he and Tinny Garagos were like, they were holding hands, they were just smiles. Brian Steele was beaming. Mark Agnifilo was, they were just looking at each other. They felt like this was a great moment. They knew this is what it was a mixed verdict, but obviously he was acquitted of the most serious charges. Sean Combs could not resist turning around, looking at his family. Before they read the verdict, when he came into the courtroom, he looked at his mom, he says, I love you, Mama. His 84-year-old mother has been in court every single day. She's 84 years old. She's been here to support her son, and they left momentarily, but everyone will return this afternoon at 1 o'clock when we find out what's going to happen with his bail package.
Great job, an emotional day for everyone, certainly for the defendant. You can hear the emotion outside. There has literally been a crowd of spectators just about every day of this trial. Our Anthony Carlo is with that crowd now. Anthony, a little bit of what's going on there. We hear the chanting behind Darla.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on. You could call it a frenzy of sorts. I just want to show you how many people are out here. It is a media frenzy. Right now, there are both supporters of Sean Combs outside of the courthouse and those who oppose Sean Combs and the result of this verdict today, really arguing with each other in the middle of the street. I do want to show you some video, though, of Sean Diddy Combs' family leaving the courthouse just a few moments ago. We know that his family has been attending this trial every single day. Janice Combs, Sean's mother, Christian King Combs, Sean Diddy Combs' son, one of them at least, was brimming from ear to ear as he left the courthouse just a few moments ago, and actually encouraging supporters by holding a hand up to his ear as if to sort of elicit some cheers. I did hear one gentleman yell out, "Bad Boy Entertainment." Of course, Sean Diddy Combs, the founder of that record label, and not only Christian but Justin Dior Combs, another son of Sean Diddy Combs, Delilah, Chance, and Jesse, Sean's daughters, and Quincy Brown, another son of Sean. So his entire family has been here supporting him, obviously, throughout the trial. What we've been hearing from folks out here today reacting about this verdict, essentially some of them are saying that this will forever leave a stain on Sean Diddy Combs' Combs' legacy, despite getting the best result possible, if you will. Some say that this was. There are those who still say that this is inevitably going to go down in history. We know the kind of icon that Sean Diddy Combs is in the music world. People, many of them grew up rooting for this man, and many of them are still rooting for him today. You've got others out here saying that this is a message that basically domestic violence is something that is acceptable. That's what another person who told me, who was gathering outside of the courthouse and reacting to that verdict as it came down. I do want to try to maybe find somebody who's been out here talking to some of the press. Excuse me, sir, how you doing? You've been out here after the verdict. You've been out here talking with people after this verdict today that came down. What is your reaction to? I have
no idea what the verdict is.
You have no idea. Well, it was a split verdict.
Okay.
Yeah. And your thoughts? Are you a Sean Diddy Combs fan? Will you still be one?
I'm not a fan one way or the other. I know RICO's a hard charge. Split verdict is not a surprise.
Not a surprise. Why do you say that?
RICO's a tough charge. Did the RICO charge get the...
RICO is something they were not able to find him guilty of.
Of course, it's a tough charge.
Okay, so you've got a lot of reaction. We'll send it back for you now, but again, a frenzy outside here of court.
Yeah, Anthony, to that point, it was such a magnet for people from all different walks of life and interest in the case or not, or perhaps just walking by. You mentioned, well, he really became known as the son of Harlem. I mean, he really built up the East Coast hip-hop game, certainly back in the 1990s. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out with this bond package and then also what happens with his sentence. Let's talk about the bond package, because we know the defense attorneys are arguing for $1 million cash bond guaranteed by 3 people we presume to be his family. Ira Judelson joins us now to talk a little bit more about that. You're a bail bondsman, I understand. Can you walk us through what this package looks like and how they will assemble this to be presented to the judge? Ira? All right, so as we wait to establish Ira, we believe he's going to be a guest to talk about a little bit more about how we're going to put this together as he's taking a look at his camera there. When you think about Sean Diddy Combs and what he meant to hip-hop, certainly was the focus of so much attention, not just here in this country, but around the world. So, Ira, I see your camera's ready. Let's go to you now, because we want to talk about this bail package. $1 million. We understand 3 guarantors. We expect that to be his family, close family members. How does this work?
Well, in the federal system, they have pretrial services. So each family member would sign personally for the package of $1 million. It's different than the state system where a bond is actually put up. I was initially brought in on the first package where it was $50 million, and we were going to provide the private security in an apartment here in New York for Mr. Combs.
And so as part of that process, Sandra, I mean, there's so many questions that piggyback off of that, right?
Yeah. In your estimation, you've done this for a while. Is it likely that this package is going to be accepted? I mean, earlier on in this trial, more serious charges. The verdict today, convicted of 2 of the lesser charges. I would think it would make it more likely that what you're offering would be accepted by the court.
Well, that's up to the judge. And, you know, in the federal system, they look at flight risk. They look at danger to the community. In this case, Mr. Combs was acquitted of the more serious charges. I believe bail should happen, and I believe that Mr. Combs will get out. It depends on whether or not the judge will let him go to his Florida house or his California house. I've worked with all the attorneys on packages before, especially Mr. Gnifilo, and we'll see what happens. I was called in, as I said originally, where we put a big package together, and it was denied by the court. So I think it's really up to the judge now to see whether or not he's going to grant that bail and go from there, and what the terms of the bail will be, whether he surrenders his passport, whether he's allowed to go in certain areas, whether he has to stay in New York. Will there be private security? I don't know.
So, Mr. Judelson, just one last quick question. Do you get that call immediately after the verdict, or are you on standby for the client? How does that work?
Well, in other cases, I've done Harvey Weinstein, I've done Conor McGregor, I've done Plaxico Burress, and Ja Rule, and some other major celebrities. A lot of times when, you know, cases like this happen, it takes a little time because as everybody in the world right now sees, no one knew what the verdict was going to be. So, you know, my phone is buzzing as we speak, and I don't know who it is. I'm not checking it, but it could be the attorneys looking to say, hey, could you kind of help us consult on this bail package? What do you think? Can you get your team together and put it on the spot? Right now, I think the judge is deciding from both sides, hearing arguments from both sides, whether the number is correct and whether or not, you know, what parameters around the bail is going to be. In other cases, you know, in state cases, there's certain ankle bracelets put on a defendant. There might have to be an ankle bracelet put on Mr. Combs. I don't know. Again, it's really up to the judge right now, and he's deciding.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how it plays out. Well, don't let us keep you from the phone calls. Ira Judelson, we'll let you get back to the work, and if it warrants, we'll come and chat with you again. We appreciate you taking time to talk to us. It is interesting because the prosecutors are saying that Sean Combs has the means to fly anywhere in the world, and so the flight risk is enormous. His defense attorneys are saying, look, he's going to be here with his family or in Miami at one of his homes there. But he did say, according to what was reported by Darla and some other people in the courtroom from ABC News, he looked at his family after the verdict was read and said, I'm coming home, baby. I'm coming home. It's interesting when you think about how it played out. We're talking about it from the defense point of view, but for the prosecution, this is a huge defeat. The last stat I read was the Southern District of New York had a 95% conviction rate for the cases they bring. But what do you make of the defeat for the prosecution in this enormously huge case that was watched by so many people?
It's a big blow to the prosecution because the jury has rebuffed their charges. And this is as you mentioned, this is a district that has a seriously high conviction rate compared to the rest of the districts in the U.S. So what this really is it's a realignment. And I think when jurors give these kind of verdicts, what they're signaling is that there are things that are acceptable and not acceptable. I think, and once you start talking about people's sexual preferences and whether or not we should be the judge of whether or not that is acceptable or not. You know, one of the prosecutors made the argument, would any woman want to be in a hotel room having, you know, sex with strangers with baby oil and low lighting? I think that people and the norms and the morals are, we are not qualified to make that judgment. Now, whether or not it plays into the bigger RICO, they didn't see that as being RICO. They just didn't see it. And so I think the prosecution's going to go back. They're going to regroup. I think they're going to really look at how they bring these charges moving forward.
Just your gut. Was the RICO charge there to make the case bigger, as if it being Sean Diddy Combs, the defendant, didn't make it big enough? Was the misstep charging him with RICO to begin with?
I agree, because I think here's the problem is that juries rely on both the prosecutors and the defense to prove what they say and to show them what they said they would show them. And when you talk about RICO, there is just a different sense of what people have when they think of a criminal enterprise. Here you have 3 people in a hotel room. You have Sean Combs, either Cassie Ventura or Jane, and an escort. That is not what people typically think about when you think of criminal enterprise. I think if they had not charged criminal enterprise and gone for trafficking and transportation for prostitution, I think this may potentially have looked different.
We heard Anthony Carlo mention something about the domestic violence, and that video is so visceral. And when you see Ms. Ventura being beaten by Sean Combs, who admitted to doing so in 2016, it makes your blood boil. But then you think he wasn't charged with domestic violence.
In that case.
In that particular case, why was he not charged? Was it a statute of limitations type of situation? And then 2, how do you think that played in the minds of the jury, and where did they place that?
So first we have to acknowledge to all domestic violence survivors that is a harrowing experience for them to come forth and share their story. So we start there. The defense acknowledged that there was a lot of domestic violence when it came to Cassie Ventura. Domestic violence is a state charge. It is not a federal charge. So the federal prosecutors could not have brought that charge even if we were in the statute of limitation. So that's first and foremost, is it's a state charge. It is not something that's federally prosecuted. 2, they acknowledged that this domestic violence took place, but that it took place, and that is not what these charges are about. And so what the defense did, they addressed it immediately in their opening and said these are not related to the charges at hand. And they weren't. None of the underlying crimes, and nor could the federal prosecutors have brought charges for domestic violence.
Well, and it's interesting too, you know, Sandra, when we were talking about this case and how it all fit together, we heard from the security guard who was paid off by Sean Combs to get what he thought was the only copy of that video to try to prevent it from going public. And I say that to point out that Cassie Cassie Ventura never went to police after that.
Correct, exactly. And that was one of the things that when you talk about tampering, one of the underlying predicate crimes, she had already decided that she was not going to law enforcement and that she was not reporting it. So the idea that he was tampering with a witness that was going to report something to an investigator or to a hearing, there was no investigation. She herself declined to prosecute or to have the police called.
Yeah, had it happened, I guess, during the course of this investigation,
Correct.
he paid off the guy then to get rid of it.
Absolutely.
He would have been charged. I have to say, when a trial like this is going on for 8 weeks, we all have opinions, which you have graciously listened to for the last 2 months. You have to give the jury credit because there's so much information coming to them, and some of it really jarring and difficult to watch, to hear repeatedly every day. You have to give them credit for being able to wade through this amount of information, some of the things that may be foreign to them, but as you said, they're saying that's their business, I don't want to get into that.
And I'll tell you, I have the utmost respect for people who answer jury summons. And I know that people notoriously don't want to do it, but this is an example of why it's so important to have diverse perspectives and to have different people on the jury. Most people who answer the summons, they want to do a good job. They want to follow the law, and they understand the ramifications if they don't. And so when you talk about 8 weeks, this jury paid attention. I was in that courtroom every day since jury selection. They paid attention. They took notes. They were really tuned into what was the evidence and what did they have to prove. And it's why we have a jury system, right? You want to be judged by a group of your peers as to whether or not this rose to the criminal negligence level that should cause you to be incarcerated.
As we approach the bottom of the hour, if you're just now joining Eyewitness News, we are in continuing coverage of the Sean Diddy Combs trial that has ended in a mixed verdict. Convicted on 2 counts, but acquitted on 3. Alongside Sandra Bookman, I'm Mike Marza, joined by ABC News legal contributor Shauna Lloyd. Take us back in the courtroom as we watch the 28 days of testimony. The defense decided not to put any witnesses on the stand. But as you're watching the 28 witnesses or the more than 20 witnesses for the prosecution, was there a moment in the trial that you sort of flagged in your mind as a legal expert to say that's a problem for the prosecution?
As we listened, especially to some of Jane's testimony, this idea that the fraudulent inducement for sex trafficking was based on something, the promises he made her, the idea that they would go on these vacations, that they would do these things, the fact that the rent, which didn't begin, he wasn't paying her rent for the first 2.5 years of their relationship. I looked at that and I thought to myself,
we talked about
we talked about this. Yeah. If every person who promised something in a relationship that's fraud, that's a bit too far. I think that's too much. When I saw the personal assistant say, I don't know what was happening in the room. I was just delivering the supplies I was asked for. I thought to myself, this is a bridge too far. We cannot say that assistants and the people who support us in our businesses, my paralegal at my law firm, is she now complicit because I'm doing something in my office? That's entirely too far. And so those are the points where I thought this is overreaching.
But the jury apparently agreed with you and said, we don't see that.
Jurors are so smart. Jurors sit down, they look at the evidence, they take the time to read and understand the charge, they take the time to look at the jury verdict, and always come most often to the right decision because they are trying to do the right thing.
And they took a lot of notes.
Yes, they did. Copious notes.
Yeah.
We are hoping to, within the next few minutes to hear from some of the other folks involved with the trial here. Kimberly Richardson, one of the reporters that has been down there since day one, keeping an eye on the courtroom and the activities outside. Kimberly?
Well, Sandra and Mike, we have to look at this as somewhat of a fall from grace from Sean Combs. It has been years in the making. This all started again back in November 16th, exactly, of 2023, when Cassie Ventura filed that civil lawsuit alleging she was trapped in this cycle of abuse. We then learned about the so-called freak-offs or hotel nights. There were a lot of intimate, explicit details of Sean Combs' life that were revealed. To show you what this is all about, take a listen. I mapped it out. See what you think.
A luxurious lifestyle filled with nothing but the best of the best. From the outside, Sean Combs appeared to be on top of the world, well on his way to becoming a billionaire. But his house of cards came crashing down September 16th of 2024. Federal agents arrested the then 54-year-old inside a Midtown Manhattan hotel. Several months earlier, investigators raided his mansions in LA and Miami and found evidence they maintain that pulls back the curtain and reveals a much darker side of the music mogul. Throughout the home, what seemed like an endless supply of baby oil and lubricants, a cache of weapons, ammunition, and drugs. Prosecutors insist for 20 years, Combs was the ringleader of a criminal enterprise that, quote, abused, threatened, and coerced women into sometimes days-long drug-fueled sex parties. Paid male escorts brought in from all over the country allegedly took part in the so-called freak-offs, also referred to as wild king nights, while Combs watched and pleasured himself. Following his arrest, Combs, who pleaded not guilty, insisting the sex acts were consensual, turned down a plea deal and a trial date was set. Over the next 7 weeks, jurors would get a peek into Combs' world, listen to testimony from more than 30 prosecution witnesses, see hundreds of exhibits, including video of freak-offs, hear voice messages. Combs in his own words.
It's all good. Get your rest. You are the crack pipe. That's my new name for you, crack pipe. Or should I call you CP?
Monday, May 12th, day one of testimony in the racketeering and sex trafficking trial. Combs' family arrived at the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan. For the first time, those in the courtroom saw additional footage from an altercation between Combs and his then-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, inside an LA hotel in 2016. Video, a security guard testified Combs paid him $100,000 to make it go away. But the footage was leaked in May of 2024, months after Ventura filed a lawsuit claiming Combs subjected her to years of physical abuse, a suit he settled the next day, Ventura says, for $20 million. Ventura, who was 9 months pregnant when she took the stand on day 2 of the trial, told jurors in that video she's trying to get away from Combs during a freak-off after he assaulted her. The defense said it was simply a fight over a cell phone. Prosecutors say one way Combs controlled women, including an ex who testified under the name Jane, was by videotaping the freak-offs and threatening to release the recordings. Jane, a single mom, detailed what she called hotel nights, during which Combs would choreograph and direct sex acts between herself and a roster of male escorts. In an audio recording, you hear a conversation between Ventura and a man who claims to have seen a sexually explicit video of her. She tried to find out more, and when he sidestepped her questions, she threatened to kill him.
I will kill you if you don't show me right now. I will kill you, and I will hide you, and I will cut you up and put you in the dirt right now.
Ventura was on the stand for 4 days, giving birth to a baby boy May 27th. Jurors heard testimony from a makeup artist and a male escort who said they witnessed Combs' violence. Ventura's mother, who said she took out a home equity loan after Combs allegedly blackmailed her daughter. Several people in Combs' innermost circle took the stand, some under immunity deals, sharing how they catered to his every whim, including cleaning up after sex parties, paying thousands of dollars for damage to the hotel rooms. Combs' team of lawyers, a total of 9, from the very beginning, during opening statements until the end, said, quote, Combs is a complicated man, but this is not a complicated case. The case is about love, jealousy, infidelity, and money, not sex trafficking. If convicted of all counts, Combs could spend the rest of his life in prison.
And, of course, we now know that Mr. Combs was convicted 2 counts, what most legal experts consider the lesser of the 5 counts. The RICO charge, the biggest charge against him, he was found not guilty. We have just, in fact, received a statement from the prosecutors in this case. I will read a portion of that statement. Sex crimes deeply scar victims, and the disturbing reality is that sex crimes are all too present in many aspects of our society. Victims endure gut-wrenching physical and mental abuse, leading to lasting trauma. New Yorkers and all Americans want this scourge stopped and the perpetrators brought to justice. Prosecuting sex crimes requires brave victims to come forward and tell their harrowing stories. We and our law enforcement partners recognize the hardships that these victims endure and have prioritized a victim-centered approach to investigating and prosecuting these cases. You have to imagine, as Shauna pointed out earlier, of course, the prosecution disappointed in how these verdicts fell.
No doubt a lot of questions being asked amongst themselves in the Southern District of New York as we continue to take a live look at 500 Pearl Street, which is the address for the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan, where we expect at some point attorneys will come out and give some comments, although I suspect it will likely be after that 1 p.m. deadline, because they are working on a deadline to present whether or not Sean Combs should be released on some sort of bond package. As we wait for that, you'll hear the news conferences whenever they happen, if they're now or throughout the day, whenever they take to the podium to hear exactly how they viewed what went down today. Kimberly Richardson still outside the courthouse as we talk about the legal breakdown of everything the jury decided today. Kim?
Yes, and I'm joining now with one of the leading legal experts who's been out here every step of the way in the courtroom, analyzing every bit and piece. This is Terry Austin. Terry, thanks for joining us.
Of course, I'm happy to be here.
Terry, talk about, we just mentioned that 1 o'clock deadline today for both sides to present letters, why he shouldn't be let out, why Combs should be kept in until his sentences. What is your thoughts there?
Well, first of all, Mark Agnifilo got right up right away and said, look, the acquittal on those top charges for the RICO conspiracy and for the sex trafficking means it's only the Mann Act, and I'm applying for bail for my client. And so what the judge wants is some sort of backup for that request. He said he'll, have $1 million, he'll have co-signers, he'll take away the passport, but the judge wants both sides to present case law to say under these circumstances, particularly with the Mann Act, there is a 10-year maximum should he allow Combs to get out on bail and not go back to that Metropolitan Detention Center. And I will tell you, Sean Combs pleaded like this to the judge. He had his hands up like that, and the whole room, especially on the defense side, was listening intently to see where the judge might go. And frankly, the judge began asking questions, and I think there is some possibility that after he reads these 2 letters, he may just grant bail.
Well, one of the things that was brought up when he applied for the bail package is when he was right after he was arrested, there was a flight risk, there was fear of flight risk. There was also victims who said they were terrified that even behind bars, Combs could reach them or have second and third people reach him. Is that going to be considered with this new application?
Absolutely. And Maureen Comey, who is the lead attorney for the prosecution, said exactly that. She said there is a flight risk, and she mentioned all of the reasons why he didn't get bail in the first place. Mark Agnifilo got back up and he said, Your Honor, my client recognizes the seriousness of this. He recognizes the fact that he could have gotten life. There is no way he's going to do anything to in any way affect his bail. He will do whatever you need him to do. It's very important that he be out. So I do think Mark Agnifilo made sure the judge understood the chances of him trying to flee is nil.
You were in the court. You were in that courtroom day in and day out. Are you surprised where we are right now with the verdict? Given Note 6 yesterday found a verdict on 2 through 5. We didn't know about 1. Are you surprised where we are right now?
I am a little surprised.
Tell me more.
I did think that for the sex trafficking for Cassie, that might be a guilty. The sex trafficking for Jane, I think that was somewhat up in the air. To get not guilty sex trafficking both victims was a little surprising. I think there was evidence for Cassie, particularly that March 5th, 2016 tape, where you see her coming out of a hotel night and he forces her to the ground. He's dragging her. I would have thought that that jury said to themselves, that's sex trafficking, but they didn't. And so, yes, I'm a little surprised. I'm not surprised about the Mann Act. I did think when you have transportation of escorts, you are paying them for commercial sex activity. That's a hands down. I did expect that.
And getting back to the sex trafficking, the defense all along, and Sean Combs maintained his innocence, they said you did not charge him for domestic violence. Yes, there was abuse. Yes, and it went both ways. Do you think that's what the jury held onto in their minds and said, wait a minute?
Absolutely, they held on to that. They mentioned that during the opening statements. They mentioned that during the closing arguments. That was the whole theme. One of the things Mark Agnifilo said is this is a tale of two stories. There is the prosecution story, and obviously there's the Sean Combs story. You don't want the prosecution coming into your bedroom. That's what they did here, and I do think the jury was thinking about that in the back of their minds. Yes, it's terrible what he did. Yes, it's domestic violence, but it's not RICO, it's not sex trafficking, and I think that stuck with them.
What, if anything, does this verdict play? And we have civil suits following. At one point, Sean Combs was on his way to being a billionaire. As we mentioned, he has beautiful mansions in Miami, Star Island, and also in Los Angeles. Now with the verdict and looking at the civil suits, do those properties and his fortune, is that at stake in any way?
Well, at one point, he was #1 on the Forbes list. He has a lot of money. He's paying a lot of money to his lawyers at this point. And yes, some of those civil suits, we can imagine he may be paying for that as well. So he will be going through some of his finances. But I do think at the end of the day, he'll be able to keep his properties. I mean, obviously, he's still making money. So whatever he has to pay, I think he can afford. Now, I don't have his financial records, but I think if anybody can afford to pay off all these over a dozen civil suits and to essentially make sure he's good on the bail money, I think he can more than probably most of us.
Thank you, Terry, very much.
It's so great to be with you.
Yes, definitely. So that's it. We have a lot ahead of us. There's still things that need to be answered, and as all those answers come out, we will bring them right to you. Back to you guys in the studio.
Kimberly, Terry, thank you very much. Interesting perspective from another legal expert watching all of this unfold. And while we were listening to her, we were obviously asking Shauna more questions, and one of them is, talk a little bit about that bail package again. The $1 million that, you know, the 3 people signing for it, he can't leave wherever the judge, you know, says he can't go, surrenders his passport. Why is it more likely that he will get bail, or is it more likely he's going to get bail this time around rather than before the trial when they were offering a bail package? One of them was like $50 million.
Right. So we have to remember that originally when they were putting that $50 million bail package together, this was at the start. This is when the allegations were that he had this criminal enterprise. He was known to have a large amount of money. He's a very wealthy individual. He has access to a private plane. He has access to all these individuals. And there was an allegation of witness tampering. That is one of the things that the judiciary will protect very closely against. They do not want anything bothering the sanctity of their trial. So when you have those type of allegations, the judge is going to err on the side of being conservative and not issue bail. Now that we have gotten a verdict, there are no witnesses. He's clearly gotten a not guilty. There is not as much of a flight risk. The prosecution is going to say, though, that it's still potentially up to 20 years. He is a flight risk. They're going to do everything they can to confine him to a location where the judge will say, well, this is acceptable.
And so we see some of the points of the bond package as we know it. His attorneys arguing that he should only be allowed to be here in New York or his property in Miami. And sort of a personal side note, I used to live in Miami. And in fact, my condominium was right in the viewpoint of Star Island, one of the islands. You have Fisher Island, but Star Island is where a lot of these high profile celebrities live, very exclusive. And I would look down on his property, but all I would see was foliage and trees because it was highly secluded, highly, you don't want to say secretive, but it was secluded. You could not see from a helicopter or something like that. And you have to have a proof that you actually live on Star Island just to enter it. So that's the property in Florida, and we'll see what it would be here in New York. Your suspicion, though, and I was asking you this as we were listening to Kimberly as well, and Terry, what are the chances of Sean Diddy Combs walking out of court today?
Highly likely, because we have to remember the purpose of bail is to ensure that a defendant shows up for his hearing and for sentencing. When we look at the factors for determining bail, there are things such as what are the severity of the charges? Is he a potential threat to society? What are his means? Those are the questions, ties to the community. Those are all questions that have to be answered by the judge. So he has to weigh that against. If the bail package is enough to ensure that, I believe that this judge is going to err on that side.
And one of his attorneys making the point that his plane, we talked about his private plane, is actually in Maui right now.
Correct.
Part of the factor of what's going to be decided today.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting day.
Oh, yes.
Started interesting, ended interesting yesterday, started today. We want to send it back out to Darla Miles, who, as we've said, has been in the courtroom almost from the very first day of this trial. Darla, you've talked a lot about the emotion in that room when Mr. Combs listened to the verdict coming in. Talk to us a little bit about what you saw as you watched the jury, what their demeanor was like. And has the jury been released yet? I know that we're anxious to hear from some of them and their perspective on this 8 weeks.
That's right, Sandra. I have been literally inside of the courtroom every single day of this trial, and you've seen a myriad of emotions play out on all fronts. With regard to the jury, Judge Arun Subramanian asked them to stay back a little bit. He said, I want to thank all of you personally, but I need to deal with a few matters with the attorneys. That was the whole argument with regard to bail. So jurors would actually come out of the rear of the courthouse. That's the main exit of the courthouse. But there's been a lot of chatter about this jury the entire trial, because this is a jury that we saw reacting to testimony. They reacted to Jane's testimony. They reacted to Cassie Ventura's testimony. There weren't favorable facial expressions. You saw them frowning. You could see them shaking their heads. And they would lean over and talk to each other during breaks of testimony, during sidebars. They would wait kind of like classes dismissed, and they would lean over and they would chat to the degree that Judge Subramanian had to admonish them not to talk to each other, not to say anything until they officially were dismissed to deliberate. That obviously is a challenge because they're here every single day for 8 weeks, listening, taking notes, taking copious notes, and so they were not officially to start deliberating and downloading their feelings until they began deliberations. This morning when we got into court, they went directly to the jury room. They were not seated in advance, and we all came in the courtroom this morning because of the cliffhanger yesterday, because there were verdicts reached on 4 counts but not on the first count. Because of that, everybody was on time this morning. You saw all of Combs' children, his 2 sons and 2 of their girlfriends in court. They came in court holding hands. Janice Combs obviously in court every day, but everyone was there early, and they wanted to get a sense of how long the deliberations were going to take for the outstanding charge, count 1 of the racketeering conspiracy. So this morning when Sean Combs, he is always brought into the courtroom pretty early. His family wasn't there yet. When they arrived, he turned around. He was allowed to speak with the family, and he started, he said a prayer, and I'm going to read that to you. He said, stay strong, and then he just bowed his head. He said, God bless my family. God bless the hearts of the jurors. I'm praying for a not guilty verdict. God bless my family. Amen. And they all held their heads down. And after that prayer, they clapped. Then after that, Combs was taken back to the holding cell where all inmates await the verdict in the trial. It only took an hour for this note to come back. And when the note, the word came back that there was a note and that there was a verdict, you saw stress and anxiety on the faces of defense attorneys. You saw them pacing. They could not sit down until they were actually instructed to when the judge and the jury were seated inside of the courtroom. They were anxious. You could see the solemnness on their faces, and that was what we saw yesterday when they came back with a partial verdict. But when the verdict, the not guilty verdicts were being read, that's when you saw a complete 180 with what you overheard them calling themselves the dream team. He had 9 different attorneys on this case. A lot lots of attorneys. He used all of his resources to, fight for what he believed to be his innocence, to get this not guilty verdict on racketeering conspiracy and the sex trafficking charges. So then as the judge started to poll the jury, because after they read all of the verdicts for each count, the jurors had to pass the microphone one by one. Juror number 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 2, is this your verdict? At that point, Sean Combs leaned over to Tenny Garagos, who was seated next to him. He grabbed her and gave her a big smack, a kiss on the side of her face, on her cheek, and she just, face full of joy. They were all so happy, so excited. And then once the jury was sent back to the back room to wait for the comments from Judge Agnifilo, that's when we saw the cheers from the family, cheers from Sean Combs. And so this is going to be, again, another cliffhanger. We thought it was over with just the verdict, the outstanding verdict, but now we have the cliffhanger to find out whether or not he will be released on bail today. And I also want to add how deliberate this jury was in their deliberations. Yesterday, they asked for all of their testimony at one time, and obviously it assisted with this quick verdict.
All right, Darla Miles, fascinating insight as she was inside with a front row seat. Now, as we take a look on the right side of your screen here, we've all been looking at this behind Darla as the NYPD is now bringing these barricades as they are preparing for the crowds. Yeah. And they appear to be growing. Certainly, if there's a chance that Sean Diddy Combs could walk out of court, as you suspect may happen throughout the day, police are preparing for the crowd control.
Yeah, I've seen this happen before in other high-profile trials. I'm really dating myself here now. John Gotti Jr. And there were several trials in that case. But you would see this happen because you know the crowds are going to be gathering there, because it almost becomes in New York City like a happening. Yeah. There are plenty of people that have been there from the beginning for whatever reason watching, but then there are other people that are hearing the verdict has happened and they want to be part of the show. And that sounds horrible, but that is essentially what you find when you head down to court there. So what you see there is I guess the Department of Transportation in the city getting ready for whatever might happen later this afternoon.
It's always interesting, as well as we saw a little bit of this with Anthony Carlo earlier, it becomes a spectacle. And so either people are just trying to make their way through, getting to their own office, or doing whatever they're doing here on a Wednesday afternoon or about to be afternoon, and other people actually coming down because they heard the Sean Diddy Combs situation is coming to a conclusion, and those streets are not that wide. It is Lower Manhattan, so it is a tight, packed area. So we're seeing all of that play out. Again, just to recap and as a reset here, we expect to hear from the attorneys at some point today. But right now, we're about an hour away from an important deadline on whether or not Sean Combs will have the opportunity to walk out of court today.
Both the defense and prosecution have been asked by the judge to present the defense present their plan, what their bail proposal is. Prosecution is going to tell the judge why they don't believe Mr. Combs should be released from jail. Our distinguished legal analyst here, Shauna, believes it is likely that he might get bail today based on the fact that he was convicted of the 2 lesser charges.
Correct. And just the factors that the judge has to consider when determining bail. We now have eliminated a lot of the factors why he was not granted bail initially, right? The threatening of witnesses and the fact that he may be a danger to society, flight risk. So I think as some of those have been alleviated, the judge has a different evaluation that he's making when it comes to this bail hearing.
We're about 3 minutes from a reset, as we're going to reset at the top of the hour for people joining us for Eyewitness News at noon. But Shauna, just in the final few moments of this hour, I'm curious, what is the process right now? What are the prosecutors doing? What are the defense attorneys doing? Because I presume that they stayed in the courthouse and they're diligently working on their arguments.
Absolutely. They're working on their arguments. They are shoring up all the case law to support their position, because this judge is very down the middle. He's going to play it by the book. So they're trying to support their positions. And then once they do that, they are going to write those papers and submit them for the judge to review. Because let's remember, the judge likes to be prepared. He's going to read both letters before he goes into oral arguments.
And that's at 1 o'clock.
Correct.
Okay.
Anthony Carlo is downtown outside the federal courthouse. Anthony, I know that you are with some of the spectators that are gathering there, hoping, I believe many of them, hoping to possibly see Mr. Combs this afternoon. Anthony?
Sandra, that's exactly right. There are many spectators still out here. And, you know, the overwhelming reaction from the folks that we've been talking to is that the jury got it right. We've talked to plenty of folks out here who are big supporters of Diddy and those who are not. And we do hear on both sides of the argument, obviously, how things could have shaken out in different ways. But one gentleman I spoke to just a little while ago, the way that he put it, I think, was pretty spot on. You know, he grew up watching Diddy. He said Diddy was always on TV. He was a role model of sorts. And so the folks that have paid attention to this trial, obviously it's been very difficult for them to listen to some of the accusations that the prosecution put forward during this trial. Cassie Ventura taking the stand and detailing many of the, you know, grotesque encounters that she had with Diddy. I do want to pan the camera, though, to the right here. That is Sean Combs' mother, who we're watching right now, walk into the courthouse. And as you can hear some cheers from the folks who are standing outside, I believe what she just said is, "We're doing all right." So she's waving to fans. You see the fans there hanging over the barricades, waving, blowing kisses. I'll try to pause for a second. I don't know if you can hear the cheers. Yeah, so she's giving a thumbs up there. I wish we had a mic over there where we can get her audio of what she's saying, but just by looking at her demeanor, you can see a weight has been lifted off of her chest. She's been in this courthouse every single day of this trial, obviously rooting for her son. And it's a perspective that not too many people have seen before. The mother of Sean Diddy Combs waving to fans and supporters outside of the courthouse, where she just watched her son be acquitted, really, of some of the most serious charges in this trial. Found guilty on charges that, at the end of the day, really mean that Sean Diddy Combs is going to get a second chance here. So again, a lot of activity outside of the courthouse. That right there was probably the premier moment for you, because we actually got to see a very up-close and personal reaction from Sean Combs' mother. Probably the closest person to him in his life, and probably the first person that he wants to see now, as by all accounts this has been somewhat of a victory for the music mogul and his family. For now, we're live outside of the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Anthony Carlo, Channel 7 Eyewitness News. I'll send it back to you.
Anthony, thank you very much. We just want a quick programming note here. Tell you about an ABC News special coming up tonight at 10 p.m. Verdict, the Diddy trial. That's tonight at 10 p.m. an ABC News special. Just taking a look over the last 8 weeks. And of course, today's quick verdict this morning.
And so much more to come. In fact, Eyewitness News at noon starts right now.
A verdict has been reached in the criminal trial of Sean Diddy Combs. The jury delivered a mixed verdict, acquitting him of the most serious charges of racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking, but he was convicted on the prostitution-related offenses, which could land him behind bars for years.
Combs appeared to be overwhelmed with emotion, perhaps wiping tears from his eyes, kneeling in prayer as that verdict was read. He put his hand over his face, visibly smiled once the judge got off the bench. And then he slid down in his chair and again in the prayer motion, thanking the moment that he was in. And a good afternoon to all of you. I'm Mike Marza, in for David.
And I'm Sandra Bookman. We're going to continue our coverage of the verdict in the Sean Combs trial. The jury, made up of 8 men and 4 women, deliberated for 2 days. On the third day, they found the hip-hop mogul guilty on charges of transportation to engage in prostitution.
But jurors acquitted him of the most serious charges in a case that featured salacious allegations that he coerced women into sexual encounters with other men, sometimes referred to as freak-offs or hotel nights or king nights. The 55-year-old music mogul charged with 5 counts, but was only convicted of 2 that have a maximum time of 10 years in prison each.
Now, his family, they've been in the court nearly every day since he was arrested nearly 1 year ago. Well, today they walked out of the courthouse hand in hand. His mother, Janice, at one point pumped her fist in the air, a sign of victory. Eyewitness News reporter Darla Miles has been covering this story since the start of trial back in May. She's outside the court this afternoon with more. Darla?
Cassie Ventura was just
Sandra and Mike, you know, we just saw that sketch of Sean Combs kneeling in prayer, and over the last 24 hours, that is what we have seen since the jury began its deliberations. The family has held several group prayers inside of the courtroom, and this morning, as the jury began to deliberate again, because they were still hung on that first count, he led them in a prayer asking God to bless their hearts. He was praying for a not guilty verdict and for God to watch over his family. He then sat down at his seat and read Psalms 11. It was a printout of Psalms 11 as the court proceeding began. He never looked up. You could see he was meditating, really focused on what was going to come his way. They didn't know what this mixed verdict was this morning, and so his attorneys were very anxious this morning as they came into the courtroom, somber faces, not knowing what to expect and how long it might take to deliberate on count 1 where they were hung yesterday. So then when Judge Arun Subramanian came, he read the note. He said the note was returned at 9:52 a.m. saying that they had reached a verdict on all 5 counts, and then he brought the jury into the room to read their verdict one by one, count by count. The first verdict, racketeering conspiracy, not guilty. You saw him do a fist pump, and he was still looking down. He never looked up. He was still kind of meditating, waiting for, anticipating all of the verdicts for each charges, for each count. And so then they listed sex trafficking, Cassie Ventura. He nodded his head. Interstate prostitution for Cassie Ventura. Guilty. He was shocked. He was visibly affected when that one came. You could tell he was not ready for that to come, like a kinetic, like a real serious shock, because I think, you know, once you start hearing the repetitive not guilty verdicts, there may have been an assumption that there was going to continue to be a not guilty verdict. So then after that, as they began to read the verdicts, he grabbed Timmy Garagos' hand. They were fist pumping. His attorneys were complete 180. They couldn't even sit down waiting for the verdict to be read. They were nervous, and they were kind of spread out. It was almost like a security detail. One was positioned here, one was positioned here, one was positioned back there, and they were pacing back and forth, waiting for that verdict to be read. They were all seated when the verdict was read. They were all smiling. When Judge Arun Subramanian then pulled the juror to ask juror number 1, juror number 2, juror number 3, is this your verdict? Each one of them said yes, yes, yes. That is when we saw a moment when Sean Combs reached over to one of his lead attorneys, Timmy Garagos. He grabbed her, he kissed her on the cheek, beaming and smiling. During this time, he leaned back, he kept turning towards his family. I'm coming home, I'm coming home. It's gonna be okay. And also, as they were polling the jury, you could see Sean Combs looking at them, trying to make eye contact with them, with his hands. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you very much. That's kind of like a humility that he's shown throughout the trial, communications that he was actually admonished for during the trial for trying to make eye contact with the jury and connect with them. I don't believe any juror looked back at him. You could see a few of them kind of smiling, looking downwards, but I was focused on Sean Combs. He was about 10 feet to my left the entire trial, where he was seated at his defense table and the press row. And so he just kept thanking the jury. As the jury exited, he again was just thanking the jury, thanking the jury. And that is when we saw that dramatic moment. When the jury exited the courtroom, he dropped down to his knees. No one saw it coming. You looked over, he was on his knees, very prayerful, being very thankful for the verdict that was rendered, being acquitted of all of those charges. His family, as they have been known to do, when they get into this moment of prayer, they all bow their head. They were standing, they bowed their head, and then when he stood up, then there was loud cheers in the courtroom, loud cheers, a couple of outbursts of cheers. You saw him hugging his attorney, hugging Timmy Garagos, Mark Agnifilo, his face beet red, group hugs. You know, he has 9 attorneys, so they were group hugging. You could hear them saying, dream team, dream team. I was in the elevator with Mark Agnifilo. I asked him, you know, he said he's never felt like this in 34 years. I said, well, what does that feel like? He said, I am relieved that I'm not miserable. When the not guilty verdict, when he was acquitted of all those top charges, Judge Arun Subramanian said, government, is there anything from the government? The government said no. Then he asked Mark Agnifilo, is there something from the defense? He goes, absolutely. I believe this defendant, having been acquitted of the most serious charges, he should be returned to his family. He should be able to return to his home at 2 Star Island. He said that he treasures this opportunity, and he would never run afoul of any opportunities should he be released on bail. Maureen Comey, the lead prosecutor for this case, stood up. She vigorously fought against the bail the same way she vigorously argued this entire case, saying, listen, these underlying circumstances still exist. You heard the testimony. You heard what these victims testified to in terms of the violence and the threats, and these are still mitigating factors, and they still exist. At that point, Tini Garagos, you could see her going off. She was pointing her finger at Mark Agnifilo, just kind of like, you could just frustrated that there was still no, the government was still relentless in their prosecution of Sean Combs. Then the judge asked specific questions. What does this look like? If he is released on bail, Mark Agnifilo, what does that look like? Does he walk out of the front door today? He said, absolutely yes. I don't have a bail package prepared, a formal bail package, which is required in this situation, but off the cuff, we propose $1 million. We have 3 responsible family members who are here who can sign for the bail. We already have his passport. We rented out his plane. His plane is in Maui right now, so has no access to his personal plane. So he will never, he would not jeopardize any opportunity there would be should he be released on bail. And then Judge Submaranian asked Combs, I'm sure you don't want to go back to MDC. He comically shook his head, no, and he's been known to kind of react like that in trial. Laughter burst out in the courtroom. Obviously, there was levity, having been acquitted of the most serious counts. So he shook his head, no, like, I definitely don't want to go back there. And so only within an hour, these parties, both parties, have to submit an official letter. Mark Agnifilo, what does that bail package look like? And do you have a person to execute this bail package? You have to meet with pretrial services before you can completely execute a bail package. And then the prosecution has to present case law under these circumstances. Have we had a circumstance where you have a defendant who has still been convicted of 2 counts of interstate prostitution? Should they still be released on bond? So Comey again said this is off the cuff. We weren't expecting it, but we need to dig into the case law, and we need to come back with a letter saying why we oppose it. And this is no different than any of the fierce infighting we have seen throughout this trial. Neither side has been given an inch when it comes to the one single line of the wording that goes back to the jury responses, what text messages are in, what videos go in. They are fighting tooth and nail this entire trial. The jury has been paying attention this entire trial. They've been talking to each other even when they were told not to talk to each other about the trial. We saw them reacting to the testimony. So this is a culmination of 2 months, 8 weeks of long days of testimony, sometimes laborious testimony with federal agents just reading out text messages, going through the inventory of what was found at the searches of each of his homes, the LA home, the Miami home, and his mother has been in trial every day, in the courtroom every day. His sons come mostly every day. We did see his 3 daughters at the beginning of the trial, but when it began to get heavy with the testimony.
Darla has been describing the emotion in the courtroom just a short time ago. That is Sean Combs' mother. They are really, really close. Her waving to the crowd, obviously relieved that the verdict essentially went her son's way this morning. He was not convicted of the most serious charges. And to that end, we've had an opportunity to speak with other family members, right, Mike?
To your point, Sandra, Sean Combs looking at his mom, among other family members, and said, I love you, Mama, right after the verdict was read. In fact, some of the family members are in Lower Manhattan, waiting to see what happens, whether or not Mr. Combs is released. Dan Crouch just talked to one of Sean Combs' 7 children. Dan, what can you tell us about the conversation?
Well, Mike and Sandra, everyone is anxiously waiting to hear from Combs' family members. And as we speak, many of his children are inside this Sprinter van here behind me in Tribeca. We've seen this van a lot on the news over the past 10 weeks as many of the family members and many of his children have shown up for these court proceedings. They show up in this van in the morning and they leave at the end of the day. Right now, they're staying tight-lipped inside this van. But one of our producers just spoke exclusively with Combs' son, Christian, in an ABC News exclusive. Have a listen to what he had to say.
Hey, yo, we love y'all. We love everybody watching. So happy. Pops coming home, and God bless. God bless the whole world.
What was going through your head when the verdict was read? happy. He's so happy.
Happy, he says. They're all happy that he was only convicted on 2 of the 5 counts, facing a maximum of 20 years behind bars. Many of the family's members, as I said, including his son Justin, are right here behind me in the Sprinter van. And in case they're watching us right now on the ABC-7 NY streaming app, come on out. We want to talk to you about the reaction to your dad's verdict and what happens next. Reporting live in Tribeca, Dan Crowell, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
All right, Dan, a sigh of relief for those family members this afternoon. Of course, the first domino to fall that really exposed Sean Diddy Combs' sexual activities, domestic abuse, drug abuse as well, was that 2023 civil suit from his former girlfriend and the prosecution's star witness, Cassie Ventura.
Really triggered all of this criminal side of things. And we remember early on in the trial when Cassie went through days and days of delivering graphic and gut-wrenching testimony. Her lawyer spoke soon after the verdict was reached.
Kimberly Richardson continues our coverage. She's been covering this trial from the beginning as well. She's outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Kimberly?
And Sandra and Mike, just to give you a backstory on this, Cassie Ventura was just 19 years old when she first met Sean Combs. At the time, he was 37. Ventura did take the stand on day 2 of this trial here in Lower Manhattan and remained there for 4 days. She detailed how the roughly decade-long relationship at the beginning, she fell head over heels for Combs. At that point, he was at the top of his games. He signed her to Bad Boy Records. He was a hip-hop mogul, but within months, she says, things went downhill quick. That it began a cycle of violence during which she says he forced her to have unwanted sex with paid male escorts all the time, high on drugs. The so-called freak-off, she said she was there and that Combs was directing it all and he was watching from the sideline. She says she tried to leave Combs and actually did in 2018. That was the last time she saw Combs. The first time she saw him was she stepped into this courtroom on day 2 of testimony. That was May 13th. Her legal team, yes, was here first thing this morning and spoke after the verdict was handed down. Take a listen.
Pleased that he's been held responsible for something, which is something that hasn't happened in his lifetime. And, we're hopeful that ultimately he receives a substantial sentence for what he's done. And, we're pleased that Cassie's brought to light everything that has happened in this trial. I just spoke with her and with the U.S. Attorney's Office team, and she's in a good place. She's pleased that, again, that the jury has found him liable, or guilty of 2 federal crimes.
Now, when Cassie Ventura took the stand on day 2 of this trial, she was up there for 4 days. She was 9 months pregnant. I sat in the courtroom and I watched. She did not look at Combs, did not look his way. She would enter the courtroom, head straight up to the witness booth. Combs would watch her. His family in the second row, they would all watch her. She did. She is married now, and she gave birth to a baby boy on May 27th. Something else that is happening out here. Where that Sprinter van is, where Dan Crowell is here at the courtroom, not far from there. This street now is behind me is Worth Street. It is now closed in both directions. The NYPD did that as a precaution because if and when Sean Combs walks out of this courtroom, you can imagine what that scene will be here. So the traffic has been shut down here on the street for about 30 minutes, and you see officers driving back and forth. They're also putting up more metal barricades to try and keep some kind of order if he walks out of the courtroom. Sandra and Mike.
Kimberly, thank you. And you can see over your left shoulder and the right of our screen, you see the crowd building, a lot of them cameras, but some people just people who are curious. Anthony Carlo in the mix. We understand the U.S. Marshals heading up this security effort, working with the NYPD. What's the scene where you are now in the noon hour, Anthony?
Well, Mike, that's right. As Kimberly said, this is a big lift for the NYPD, working with agencies to make sure that Sean Combs, if he is released, can leave the courthouse. Just look across the street, though, and you can take a look at the crowds of people you've been seeing from various angles. As you said, Mike, a lot of people who are just curious. I mean, we are talking about not just anybody here. We're talking about Sean Diddy Combs, who has been on trial. So people will stop and they will watch, especially as the verdict came down. I do want to show you some video of Diddy Diddy's family leaving the courthouse just a little while ago. Janice Combs, his mother, walking out with his children following. We heard Darla Miles talk a little bit before about Christian King Combs, one of Diddy's sons, who was flashing that smile and egging on the crowd as they cheered. Sean Combs' mother came back a little while ago and entered the courthouse as she was cheered on by fans. We've been talking to the fans, and they are happy. What else could they be right now? This went Sean Combs' way. It could have gone a lot worse had he been found guilty of the most serious counts in really what was a transcending case, and that did not happen. So today, although we have heard some say that regardless of the situation with the verdict, this is still the wrong messaging when it comes to domestic violence, though he was not on trial for domestic violence. We've heard plenty of people say this will ultimately not stain his legacy, and people should separate the music mogul from who he was in his personal life. Take a listen.
I didn't want them to find him guilty on the RICO, because then I would have put him in prison for the rest of his life. I wanted him to do some type of time where he could sit down and rehabilitate. You know what I mean? Because he was on drugs.
I think Diddy is guilty morally. Morally, he has done things bad to other humans. But as far as the legalities, I think there was no RICO. The charges were boosted up, trumped up.
But I still feel like he should get some time, because he did a lot of things that just wasn't cool. So I have mixed feelings about it.
Yeah, well, a lot of people do have mixed feelings, but the point here is that regardless of how you feel, the people who are out here right now want to stop and catch a glimpse of really what is part of history here in New York City. For now, we're live outside the courthouse. I'll send it back to you guys.
Thank you very much, Anthony. We're going to bring in ABC News legal contributor Shauna Lloyd. You're listening to folks talking there, Shauna. Mixed feelings, we're not surprised. Absolutely. Reaction to the verdict. I think the one man summed it up. He never thought there was RICO should be involved in the case. And then the other guy said, but based on what we heard, he probably should do some time. Absolutely. It just won't be what he could have been facing.
Right, and I think that's what people may be missing here, is that although this is an overarching win for the defense, he is still facing 2 guilty counts that have a maximum of 10 years each. Because they're 2 different victims, they can be run consecutively. However, most times, a lot of times, they are run concurrently. So he is still facing jail time. We just do not know, and we will have to wait until sentencing to know exactly how much jail time.
Now, if you remember back to the late 1990s, early 2000s, there was a shooting at a nightclub in New York City in 1999, and Sean Combs was charged as part of that shooting that injured 3 people. In 2001, he was acquitted on his charges. But that's the key there. He was acquitted in that case. So more than 20 years later, he's now facing these 2 guilty verdicts. Will that factor at all into what the judge looks at as far as the criminal history? No, because it was an acquittal, right?
Correct. It was an acquittal. The judge is not going to look at that. He is going to look at the factors of this case. He's going to look at the charges that he's guilty of. And then he's going to look at those, the standard, which is always going to be, will he show up? How to make him compliant? Whether or not he's a flight risk? What is his danger to society?
Let's talk about the actual sentence, though. What do you think? He faces up to 10 years on each count, up to 20. Yes. So what do you think, realistically, knowing his background and what we talked about, no criminal history, really, what do you think he'll get realistically?
Based on my experience, I think we're looking at somewhere between 2 to 5 years. That's where I expect the judge to lie. I do not expect him to get 10 years. I don't think there's enough aggravating factors that the prosecution is going to be able to put forth. So we're looking sort of the mid to lower end of the spectrum.
And do you believe that to be on each of those 2 to 5 years?
That is correct. I believe that to be on each of the charges, somewhere in that range.
And then the judge will decide whether or not they're served consecutively or concurrently.
That is correct.
Which can make a difference.
And when you're looking at that could still be significant time. I mean, we're talking about something that could be a chunk of time that he would be incarcerated.
Any time in prison is significant.
It's too long. Yes.
Well, you saw his reaction. We heard about his reaction. Do you want to go back to the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn? And he was a vigorous no, telling the judge he certainly does not want to do that. Federal prison, different story, but certainly behind bars and not free.
Yes, absolutely.
Shauna Lloyd, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yep.
All right, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to going to have more reaction on this split verdict, specifically Sean Diddy Combs' lasting legacy as well. And a quick programming note tonight to pass along, Sandra.
Yeah, at 10 o'clock, tune in for this ABC News special, Verdict, the Diddy trial, right here on Channel 7. We'll be right back.
Hey, New York, turn this off. Turn this on. Get your breaking news and headlines from the Eyewitness News team. Live with the very latest. Right when you wake up. Get ready for plenty of sunshine. Start your day early. Tomorrow, starting at 4:30 a.m., only on Channel 7 Eyewitness News this morning.
Fill the grill at ShopRite for the 4th with huge savings, like 80% lean ground beef family pack, just $3.49 a pound. And fresh corn, 10 for $2. Fill the grill at ShopRite. We are here.
We're on vacation.
I'm not good at vacation.
How do I look? Ow! Looking good, brother. You thought you could beat me. You don't even have your license.
Dad, I'm 7.
Probably show me. Probably show me. Get Kalahari away.
Welcome to Wren. Our showrooms are the biggest in America. With up to 100 kitchen displays, free home measuring and design, and a virtual reality experience. All of our kitchens are proudly made in the U.S., then delivered directly to you. We cut out the middleman. Nice work, Todd. So you get the highest quality kitchen at an unbeatable price. Visit your local Wren showroom today.
I'm John Morgan of Morgan & Morgan. When you use Uber or Lyft, you're taking a gamble. You have no idea who that driver is. Were they paying attention to their phone and not the road? Injured in an Uber or Lyft accident, you could have a big case. Morgan & Morgan.
Next live.
It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's an all-new Live with Kelly and Mark.
With Nicholas Hoult from Superman. Plus,
Wouldn't be 4th of July around here if we didn't make our audience members compete for things.
audience members go head-to-head in a festive 4th of July game.
We're having a ball.
Ready, set, go!
And red, white, and blue bargains with Monica Mangan.
Watch Live tomorrow morning at 9
on ABC-7.
As we wait and watch 500 Pearl Street, we expect a decision on whether Sean Diddy Combs will be able to walk out of this courthouse today, pending an opportunity for a bond package. But Sandra, as we think about Sean Diddy Combs and the global influence that he has had over decades and decades, not only leading the hip-hop world, certainly on the East Coast, but you think of Ciroc Vodka, he became a big brand ambassador for, Sean John Clothing, and just all of the things as an entertainer that he brought on the global stage. A lot of people have strong reactions about what happened.
And we're curious one way or the other about how this trial was going to play out. Our Crystal Cranmore is in Times Square, where she is getting reaction to some of those folks who have been watching this trial today and then for the last few weeks, and then the verdict today. Crystal?
Good afternoon, Sandra and Mike. Well, Mike, you said it. Diddy is a cultural icon. I mean, from the fashion to the liquor to the music, of course, many people around the world know him. So it's only natural that we came down to Times Square and spoke to tourists, some of whom were children in the 90s. That's when, of course, we saw Diddy back then, of course, known as Puffy or Puff Daddy, really blew up. So, of course, a lot of people actually that we spoke to were surprised that he was acquitted of the most serious charges, but others not so much. Take a listen.
Let's not be surprised here. He's a celebrity, and you know, maybe the jury was swayed that way, but you know, we'll see how many years if he gets anything at all.
I'm really not surprised. I think it was just too split, you know, but I think he was probably guilty. That's my opinion.
It feels like there is no protection for women. It feels like on every front, whether it's government, judicial, there is no justice for us at any turn.
I'm glad that he was found not guilty of the RICO charge. I don't think they had enough evidence to say that he actually did it. So I'm glad they actually looked at the evidence, what he was being charged for, and based it off just that.
Diddy was looking at potentially life in prison with that racketeering and sex trafficking charges. People that we spoke to, many of them saying that charge would have simply been too harsh. Hoping at this point Diddy could use his notoriety, use his platform in some form or fashion to do more good in the community. But of course, a lot of this still unfolding as we learn more and hear from more people. We'll have more on later editions of Eyewitness News. That is the very latest here in Times Square. Crystal Cranmore, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
Thank you very much, Crystal. And Crystal said it. We will have more team coverage on the Sean Diddy Combs verdict coming up. As we take another live look outside that courthouse in Lower Manhattan, stay with us for more coverage at 12:30.
We're also tracking the weather in this important holiday week and the weekend forecast. Meteorologist Brittany Bell working on that right now. Hey, Brittany.
Hey, and things are drying out after a wet start this morning. Still watching mostly cloudy skies, but we'll even see some sunshine coming out later this afternoon with temperatures in the 80s. Tomorrow, dry, but we'll watch out for a few afternoon showers and storms. Some of those could be strong, but fantastic for the 4th of July. Mostly sunny, low humidity, temperatures in the 80s, and nice weather sticks around for the weekend. I'll let you know what's in store for early next week coming up.
Tonight, tracking major delays and cancellations that could impact your holiday travel. Plus, the spending bill narrowly passing the Senate. With the House battle up next, what changes will get it to the president's desk? World News Tonight with David Muir is the #1 newscast in America.
I started to get my life back when I reached out for help. I made the call because my addiction became too much. I want to feel like myself again.
The call was my first step towards getting better for myself and my family. Being with my daughter is everything, so I reached out. Every moment in recovery makes me stronger.
Once I reached out and learned about medication that can support my recovery, I was able to do more with my life. And now I know that there are better days ahead.
REACH-NJ is here for you 24/7. 844-REACH-NJ.
Discover the art of the road trip in Chester County's Brandywine Valley. Starting route to Chester County's Brandywine Valley. Find family fun, places to unwind, and your bestie bliss. Food, fun, adventure, art, and history. It's your road trip. You choose. All done cruising. I've saved this as our favorite road trip. Book a summer getaway with untimed tickets to Longwood Gardens at brandywinevalley.com.
It's finally Hard Rock Bet jackpot season.
And jackpots are always better with friends.
Winning a jackpot.
You're good.
I am good.
New players get a $25 casino bonus on us.
At Paris Baguette, delight in our summer berry trifle or the new strawberry pistachio fraisier cake. Grab one or both for your next summer gathering. Stop in today or order online at parisbaguette.com.
Eyewitness News needs your help to protect our children. Have you seen Lowen? ABC-7 thanks you for helping to protect our children.
Welcome back. I'm meteorologist Brittany Bell. Things are cloudy but drying out in the city, and that's the scene for most of the tri-state. We'll even see some sunshine later this afternoon. In the city, it's 78, light winds near 2 miles per hour. The forecast for a high of 84, and that's pretty much where we should be this time of the year. Sunset at 8:31. Temperatures in the 70s and the 80s at 73 in Islip, 79 in Poughkeepsie, and 81 in Morristown. Also, the humidity is still very high. That's going to drop just a tad later this afternoon. I want to show you rainfall totals since yesterday. The bullseye was across Ocean and southern Monmouth County. That's where we had flooding issues near Lakewood and Neptune with rainfall totals over 3 to 3.5 inches. So on radar, we're getting most of this rain out of here except for a few lingering sprinkles near the South Fork. It's wet in Southampton, East Hampton, all the way towards Montauk. That will continue to move offshore over the next hour or so. A cold front moving through the tri-state. That's why we're holding on to cloud cover and a few lingering sprinkles. But once this front moves away from us, that's when things begin to clear and clouds break apart. We're seeing that on Futurecast with a mixture of sunshine and clouds. Now, I can't rule out an isolated shower later this afternoon, especially south of the city near this front as it moves offshore, but things will be mainly dry with a slight drop in the moisture. This evening, skies are clear to partly cloudy. Now, let's talk about tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, things are dry if you're traveling, but it could be a little messy Thursday afternoon. That's due to another cold front that will come in, squeezing out a few thunder showers across the tri-state. It's not going to be widespread, but if you do get under it one of these showers or storms, get ready for brief heavy rainfall and also the chance for gusty winds. A leftover shower could linger late Thursday evening, but into early Friday morning, we are done with the rainfall, shaping up for a fantastic 4th of July. Plenty of sunshine, lower humidity, and temperatures in the lower 80s. One or two of the storms tomorrow could be severe. There's a marginal risk for severe weather, level 1 out of 5, damaging winds and downpours and small hail. That's the main threat, but it's not going to be widespread. After we get that quick moving cold front out of here, high pressure comes in just in time for the 4th of July, bringing in plenty of sunshine, and we stay fantastic throughout this weekend. The only change is humidity could start to go up a tad on Sunday, but just perfect beach weather both days. Today, 84, some sun mixing in, turning a tad less humid late, especially north and west of the city, and tonight down to 72. By tomorrow, temperatures in the mid to upper 80s, stuffy and steamy, partly to mostly sunny with the spotty afternoon storm. For the rest of the 7-day forecast, nice on Friday, still sunny throughout this weekend, and the chance for showers Monday and Tuesday. We'll be right back after the break.
It's time for another social media debate, wedding edition. He proposed at someone else's wedding, and it's now gone viral. Was it okay to do that? Plus, how much say should a woman have in her engagement ring? Next, Tamron Hall. Today at 2, right here on ABC7.
When doctors fail to follow medical safety rules during delivery and babies are injured, Jacoby & Myers is here to help you hold doctors accountable for their preventable medical errors. When doctors wrongly diagnose medical conditions that lead to catastrophic injury or death, Jacoby & Myers is here to help you hold doctors accountable.
The breaking news here on Eyewitness News is we are taking a live look at the federal courthouse. We're taking a live look at the federal courthouse here at the bottom of the hour, where Sean Diddy Combs was just convicted of 2 of the 5 counts he was charged with. Those 2 charges for transporting people across state lines for the purpose of engaging in prostitution, dealing with 2 former girlfriends, Cassie Ventura and a woman who testified under the name Jane. Right now, Combs' lawyers are trying to get him released from prison, but this video is from his family that arrived here in Lower Manhattan, and as you can see, Sandra, reacting to the verdict.
Yeah, we've been watching them all afternoon, going in and out of the courthouse. You hear them saying,
one of his sons there in that shirt with the green on it saying he's coming home. Let's listen.
Any reaction on the verdict?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Free pop.
So the particulars of the bond as we know it to be right now as the celebration continues for the Diddy family, because as you know, these are the 2 lesser charges that he was faced with. So life in prison off the table at this point. But the defense is saying it'll be $1 million cash guaranteed by 3 people close to him, and limiting his travel. First of all, his passport would be gone, but travel only to his property in Miami or here in New York.
Exactly. Eyewitness News reporter Darla Miles live in Lower Manhattan. She's been in Lower Manhattan for the past 8 weeks following this case. Darla.
Well, Sean, Sandra and Mike, let me just tell you who we just heard from in that video. That was Christian Combs. He goes by the name King Combs. He is the eldest son of Sean Combs with Kim Porter, who passed away 2 years ago. And then we also saw his middle son, Justin Combs. That's his son with the fashion expert Nisa Hilton and a best friend and some other friends and their spouses. So that is what we saw, the reaction from them in the courtroom. They came bright and early this morning. Interestingly enough, you know, everybody wanted to know what Sean Combs was wearing throughout the trial. He wore a sweater and a white collared shirt. His sons wore the same kind of outfit every day to match. And so they are very excited right now. This morning when the verdict was read, you could see Sean Combs fist pumping, excited about those not guilty verdicts, but surprised when when those guilty verdicts were read on the prostitution, the interstate transportation to engage in prostitution. He was not expecting that. At one point, he grabbed his attorney's hand. Denny Garagos, he also reached over, he kissed her. He was thanking the jurors, trying to make eye contact with the jurors. And then at the end of the proceeding, he dropped down on his knees, kneeled in prayer. We have seen him praying publicly since the verdict, since the jury started deliberating, and he dropped down on his knees in prayer. He started the day with a prayer with his family, and he ended it with that prayer. He just kept mouthing to his family, I'm coming home, I'm coming home. So in about 30 minutes, we are going to hear the arguments. I'm going back in court when I'm done with this to hear the arguments between the prosecution and the defense. The defense attorneys will be putting together a quick bail package, the $1 million bond package that you just showed. And the prosecutors have to find case law by which, it dictates whether he should be released, even though he's convicted, or if he can be, if he should still be held at MDC. But very clearly, Judge Arun Submarinian asking Sean Combs if he wanted to go back, and he was shaking his head no, like absolutely not.
Understand that reaction, Darla. Thank you so much. Darla mentioned that 1 p.m. hearing, she's headed back into court this afternoon for the next step in today's proceedings. We're going to bring in our legal expert, Shauna Lloyd here, who can explain to us this 1 p.m. deadline really is just for the lawyers to hand over what they've put together to the judge.
Yes, this 1 p.m. deadline is just for the judge to get those papers, those letters that are going to state each side's position along with the supporting case law. He still has to read it and then hear oral arguments. So I don't anticipate we'll actually know till a little later in the afternoon. Now, if the letters are short, this judge has been known to go into his chambers and read them immediately. He likes to act very expeditiously once he feels as though he has a handle on all of the case law.
You mentioned case law is important with this judge, perhaps more than most. What is it right now that the prosecutors are doing, and what are the defense attorneys doing to try to prove their case?
So the prosecution is really going to lean on the case law that supports that he should not be released, no matter what the bail package is. That's going to be their focus. For the defense, what they're going to want to focus on are those standards for why bail is set, and the fact that he does not fall under any of those categories. Therefore, he should be released with a significant bail package.
And because those 3 major charges were not guilty verdicts, that sort of tips thing in the defense direction?
It does, because now the judge can see that when we talk about these freak-offs before this, we thought it was all of these people. We thought there were so many people involved in these acts. We now know it was him, whichever Cassie or Jane, and an escort. So when we talk about being a danger to society, that has been eliminated. When we talk about witness tampering, the trial is over. There are no witnesses to tamper with. So the major arguments in the prosecution's reason as to why he shouldn't have been granted bail are now eliminated. And so I think we're going to have the judge take a completely fresh look at this. And I think there's a strong possibility he'll be granted bail.
All
right, we'll see what happens. Shauna Lloyd, always appreciate your perspective as you're standing by with us, waiting to see what happens. Thank you.
Thank you.
We also want to bring in an entertainment attorney, Mark Jacobson, to talk a little bit about Sean Combs going forward. I mean, we're talking about one of the biggest hip-hop stars, a mogul. That's the adjective we use to describe him. Is there a career left to salvage here? And what about that legacy?
And run many artists who have done very well. He has the vodka brand, he has a fashion brand, so his legacy will still be there. People felt that for a long time. I heard talk that people weren't going to listen to Michael Jackson for a long time because of what happened with him. We elected a president who was convicted of 34 counts of felonies. So, I mean, the legacy will still be there. It's going to be hard to run his worldwide operation from prison. That will be difficult. But his legacy is still there. He's still got what we call in the business great ears. He knows how to listen for good music.
Yeah, and it was just recently that they celebrated the anniversary of Bad Boy Entertainment, and they went on tour, and so there is still a huge fan base for not only Sean Combs himself, but also all the acts that he helped sign and, frankly, made stars. Mark, I'm interested because Shauna Lloyd and I, we were all just talking with Sandra about the importance of being acquitted of that racketeering charge, because if he was convicted, that would have meant that the government could go after not just his personal wealth, but also a lot of wealth around him, and it would jeopardize his family's holdings and wealth as well. What do these two other convictions mean for the possibility of what he could be facing when he has to give up possible, restitution or possible sort of numbers when you talk about the sentencing phase of this?
Well, I mean, the sentencing phase would come in the form of fines and penalties, and it's not as though Diddy is broke. He still has those businesses, so he'll probably be able to satisfy those obligations. But I imagine that the victims would now want to bring civil suits as well. And now that he's been found liable on the higher standard of beyond a reasonable doubt, it's going to be relatively easy for them to prove liability, to assert liability against him on the lower standard of a preponderance of the evidence. So they could bring in claims for civil damages, and those could be rather substantial. And as we've been talking about, this is all speculative. It's hard to know precisely what could possibly happen. The real challenge is going to be to maintain the legacy. There is still a robust market for the sale of these assets. He could sell all his companies and simply just give the money to his kids, put it in a trust, and have them be just fine. There's no obligation on him to continue working.
And we know one of the most high-profile witnesses of this trial, his former girlfriend of 11 years, Cassie Ventura, did get $20 million as part of a settlement, $10 million coming from Sean Combs himself. Mark Jacobson, we'll see how it all plays out. Certainly a lot of road to cover still in front of us. Mark, thank you.
And we are going to... Thank you, Mark. We're going to continue our coverage with reaction to the Sean Diddy Combs verdict later in this newscast. But we also want to get to some of the other news of the day.
We'll be right back.
Hey, Jeopardy fans, you have a local contestant.
Stephanie Yang, Queens.
On Jeopardy.
Watch Jeopardy tonight at 7, right here on Channel 7.
This July at Renewal by Andersen, replace your windows, your patio doors, or your entry door, and we're going to give you an amazing opportunity. You ready? Pay nothing, and I mean zero zilch nada, for 18 months. Just to be clear, that's a year and a half. I'm talking about no deposit, no payments, and no interest until January of 2027. We don't know when we'll be able to offer this special financing again, so get in on this while you can. And did you know over 60% of all our customers choose to finance? It just makes sense. But hold on, why choose Renewal by Andersen in the first place? Well, we use an exclusive window frame material. It's called Fibrex. It never needs painting. It's twice as strong as vinyl. And it was designed to handle extreme temperature swings while repelling moisture and the elements. Speaking of the elements, summer brings warm weather, and warm weather brings bugs. Lots of them. Beat it, bugs. Not on our watch. Our patio doors are designed to slide easily. They're not going to stick and let the bugs in. Replace your windows, patio doors, or your front entry door, and there's no deposit, no payments, and no interest until January of 2027. Get them now and pay down the line. And how about this? Andersen products will increase your home's value by 15%. It's true. Get out your phone, plug in your home's value, and multiply it by 0.15. That number could pay for your new windows. Now that's what I'm talking about. Book a free window and door inspection with us, and make sure to call before July 31st to lock in our special financing. 1-800-334-4422.
Back now with a commuter alert, and New Jersey transit buses experiencing some delays going into Port Authority bus terminal in Midtown after several transit buses crashed, injuring a dozen people. This all went down around 6:15 this morning on the ramp on the 4th floor. 10 people got hurt. One had moderate injuries, as it was described, and one refused treatment. The express bus lane ramp was closed during the whole thing, and that caused massive delays, but the fortunate news is it's since reopened. No word on the cause of the crash.
Police are looking for a masked gunman who shot 2 men at a bar in Harlem. Officers responded to that scene on Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard just before 3 this morning. Victims were both shot in the legs. They were taken to the hospital. They are expected to recover from the injuries. Not yet clear as what may have led up to that shooting. A suspect is in custody after 2 police officers were pepper sprayed in Times Square. This happened just before 1:30 this morning. Police say the suspect ran up to those officers. They were standing along Broadway, sprayed them in the eyes and face. Both were taken to the hospital in stable condition. Charges now pending against that suspect. Investigators have not released a motive in this incident.
Happening right now, President Trump's massive tax and spend bill, known as the Big Beautiful Bill, is back up for debate on the floor of the House. This measure barely passed the Senate yesterday, with Vice President Vance casting that tie-breaking vote. And so now the pressure is on House Republicans to pass the bill by the president's self-imposed July 4th deadline. It includes $4 trillion in tax cuts, mostly for the wealthy, and it also slashes Medicaid and the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, known as SNAP, impacting millions of kids, people with disabilities, veterans, and senior citizens.
Stay with us. Brittany Bell is coming up next with your exclusive AccuWeather forecast.
And of course, we'll be back with more on the verdict of Sean Combs as we watch and wait to see what unfolds inside the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan.
Cambridge paving stones make your outdoor dreams come true.
Cut! We need more emotion. Let's move on. Action.
Our unique ArmorTech process keeps colors rich and they'll stay beautiful for years to come.
Emphasize ArmorTech. Project more.
It's not easy working with family, but with Cambridge, you can easily make your outdoor dreams come true.
With ArmorTech, your outdoor dreams come true.
Need a getaway? Join me for some quick one-charge trips that'll get you all charged up. Let's go!
Ride along for one-charge trips Thursday on Eyewitness News mornings at 10. Sponsored by Cadillac. Visit your tri-state Cadillac dealer today. Let's take the Cadillac.
Welcome to Ren. Our showrooms
Welcome back. I'm meteorologist Brittany Bell. Things are drying out after a wet start this morning. It's still mostly cloudy, but we'll soon see more sunshine mixing in later today. So temperatures in the 70s and the 80s at 78 in Central Park. Light winds near 2 miles per hour. The forecast for a high of 84, and that's close to normal for this time of the year. The record 100 set in 1901, sunset at 8:31. It's 72 in Belmar, up to 82 in Morristown, 80 in Montgomery. The lower 70s, and nice, a little cooler south and east of the city because you're holding on to more cloud cover. And the heaviest rain over the past 24 hours across Ocean and Monmouth County, especially near Toms River, Neptune, and Lakewood. That's where we saw some flooding issues yesterday, and we added more to those totals earlier this morning. Rainfall totals over 3 to 3.5 inches near Howell and Wall, more the same close to Neptune. On radar, we're pushing most of the rain out of here except for a few sprinkles near Southampton, East Hampton, and Montauk that continues to move offshore. Now, this rain is just ahead of a cold front that's slowly making its way through the tri-state. That's why clouds are slow to clear. But this afternoon, once we tap into some drier air, more sun mixes in, so we'll see a mixture of sunshine and clouds with temperatures in the low to mid 80s. I can't completely rule out a leftover sprinkle popping up, especially south of the city later this afternoon as that front finally moves offshore, but overall looking at a dry end to the day. Tonight into early tomorrow morning, things are clear, and we start out sunny on Thursday, but still grab the umbrella just in case, because later tomorrow, a cold front brings a few thunder showers around the tri-state. Some of those could produce gusty winds and downpours, but we're dry for Friday, featuring a lot of sunshine. There's a small chance for an isolated severe storm tomorrow, a marginal risk for most of the tri-state, level 1 out of 5. Downpours, damaging winds, and small hail are all possible, but that severe threat is not widespread and very low. A lot of sun on tap for the 4th of July. Fantastic. Also low humidity, really hard to come by. Really nice weather for this time of the year, and this weekend temperatures in the 70s and the 80s with a lot of sunshine. So looking ahead to Saturday and Sunday, 87 to 89 with a chance for an isolated shower Monday and Tuesday. We'll be right back after the break.
When news breaks,
live in Harlem, here in Newark, Jersey City, live in Bath Beach.
Eyewitness News is there.
Morrisania, Long Beach, Bridgeport, live in Cranford, Pelham Bay, Kew Gardens, in Bed-Stuy,
In your neighborhood,
in Baldwin, Maspeth, Elmhurst,
in the air,
over Lower Manhattan, over the Queens Midtown Tunnel,
on the ground,
we're live in Bushwick, live in Soho, Glendale,
Chappaqua, Cranberry,
live in Kips Bay,
at the Garden,
Yankee Stadium,
wherever the big story happens.
Hollywood, in London,
Downtown Chicago. Because Channel 7 Eyewitness News is everywhere.
We are staying on top of that breaking news out of Lower Manhattan. Sean Diddy Combs has been found guilty. 2 of those 5 federal charges, now facing up to 20 years in prison. He was acquitted of the 3 charges that could have landed him in jail for the rest of his life. Eyewitness News reporter Kimberly Richardson live outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Kimberly?
And Sandra, I want to show what's going on behind me right here. This is the black Sprinter that the Combs family has been coming and going to the courthouse. Right now, his kids have arrived back here at the courthouse. Of course, we're getting close to that 1 o'clock deadline, but an unexpected day here in Lower Manhattan. In less than 1 hour this morning, jurors handed down that verdict in the high-profile trial of Sean Combs. It was note number 6 and surprised many, including Combs, who was inside that courtroom and got down on his knees and prayed. Outside of the courtroom, his mom was elated. There she is walking back into the courthouse. This was right around 10 o'clock this morning. On day 3 of deliberations, the jury found Combs guilty on two of the 5 counts he was facing, those being transportation to engage in prostitution, and the other one, or both 2 counts of those. Those are linked to ex-girlfriends Cassie Ventura and a woman who testified under the name Jane. The 55-year-old disgraced music mogul was found not guilty on the more serious charges of racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking. Yesterday, jurors hinted they had hit a speed bump in note number 5, telling the judge they could not agree on that count 1, that they were, quote, unpersuadable opinions on both sides. The judge strongly urged them to go back to deliberating, which they did. We are now approaching a very critical deadline. Again, at 1 o'clock, attorneys on both sides are expected to hand in letters stating why Combs should or should not be let out on bail. The defense has put a bail package on the table, $1 million cash, co-signed by 3 financially responsible people. The defense is asking the judge to release Combs today so he can head back to his estate in Miami, but prosecutors want Combs kept in custody, maintaining he poses a danger and could flee from justice. Again, the judge is waiting for those letters. They're supposed to be in by 1 o'clock in just a few minutes. The judge has indicated he will read them today and rule on that today, so we could see Sean Combs walk out of this courthouse. For now, we're live in Lower Manhattan. Kimberly Richardson, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
All right, Kim, we will see what happens. Meanwhile, Eyewitness News reporter Dan Krauth has been talking to some of Sean Combs' family members. Dan, what can you tell us?
Mike, Sean Combs has 7 children who have been by his side since the beginning of this 10-week-long trial. As Kimberly said, they're at the courthouse right now, but they were just here in Tribeca for the court break. I ran into his 2 twin daughters and his 3rd-born son, Christian King Combs, who had a few words to share. Have a listen.
I gave her the ones, I told her repeat. I told her repeat. My door work out myself. It's like when I'm living, this shit is too easy. Switching it up, I fill you up like this drink in my cup.
His main message there, he's happy, and he's also thankful to Combs fans for their support. He may have seemed a little stoic this afternoon, but when he left the courthouse earlier today after the verdict was read, he was smiling from ear to ear. We'll see what the reaction is later today when their father finds out whether he will remain incarcerated or be released on bond until he waits for sentencing. Reporting live in Tribeca, Dan Krauth, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
Dan, thank you very much. And we quickly want to bring back in ABC News legal expert Shauna Lloyd. It is likely, based on the outcome of those verdicts today, that Sean Combs may walk out of that jail this afternoon, awaiting, obviously, sentencing.
Absolutely. I think there's a much stronger chance here. We know that it was denied initially, but a number of the factors that they got, the prosecution got the bail granted on, denied on, are now gone. The witness tampering, the idea that he's a menace to society, that it is not safe to have him outside of the jail facility, those are eliminated. So they are in a much stronger position to make this argument now.
We have about a minute left in this portion of the broadcast, but I'm curious what happens after this, because sentencing won't be today.
No, sentencing won't be today. What's going to happen now is we're going to have this bail hearing. He's going to make a determination whether or not he will remain incarcerated or whether he will be confined to whatever the area the judge says while he's awaiting sentencing. Then they're going to get recommendations. It has to go through the sentencing guidelines. The prosecution is going to write letters to the judge as to why it should be at the higher end. The defense will do the same. So we have sentencing coming up approximately a couple of weeks, maybe even a month from now.
Okay. All right, Sean Lloyd. Thank you for hanging in there with us. It's been a long morning.
And a long 8 weeks. And when you think about what the jury went through, and now they are into a holiday weekend deciding one of the most consequential cases in New York City history, certainly when it comes to entertainers. Shauna, thank you.
Pleasure.
We just put up what the bail package the defense is asking for, and we will see what happens as the deadline is just moments away. But clearly, Sandra, when you think about the context of what the judge will be deciding, much different than what it was when Sean Combs woke up this morning.
Exactly. And Sean has pointed out this judge plays things by the books. He likes legal precedent. It will be interesting to see. And of course, if and when Sean Combs walks out of that courtroom this afternoon, we will bring it to you here on ABC7 Live. Before that, 10 p.m. tonight, there's an ABC News special verdict, the Diddy trial, I should say. Verdict, the Diddy trial, that's at 10 p.m. tonight. an ABC News special.
What's happening right now outside of 500 Pearl Street? The streets are blocked. The NYPD working with the U.S. Marshal Service in the event that Sean Diddy Combs walks out of that courtroom a free person for now, because we know that the sentencing is yet to come, convicted on 2 of the 5 counts. As soon as he walks out, if he walks out, we'll bring it to you live right here on Channel 7 and at ABC7NY.